to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, I want to review some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your communication devices, such as your cell or desk phone. This will ensure that we will not be hearing any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. During the meeting, all public participants, except for board members and district staff, will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Only the board members and staff will be visible on Zoom. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. Madam Clerk, do you want to call the roll?
Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
Mr. Couch? He's trying to log in, so he'll be in shortly. Mr. Pereira? Mr. Peterson?
Hi, I'm here.
Mr. Mr. Rickman?
Here.
Ms. Shuklian?
Here.
Mr. Wheeler?
I'm here.
Mr. Mendez?
I am physically here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, and we'll move to item 3, approval of the consent calendar.
Move to approve.
I got a second. Is there anybody in the public that wants to take any of the items 7 through 9 off and discuss?
Through the chair, I see no public comment on this item.
Madam Clerk, do you want to call the roll?
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Aye.
Ms. Shuklian?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And now we have public comment. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
Through the chair, 1 second. We do have a public comment from Ms. Jenny Holterman. Ms. Holterman, this is the study agency meeting, and we'll start our governing board meeting next. I just wanted to make sure you were speaking during the correct meeting. I believe you're muted. Ms.
Yes, I'll
Holterman?
wait for the governing board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that,
Item 5 is governing board member comments.
okay, is there any governing board comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, on my agenda, it says David Couch is still on it. Did you guys take the tee off now and the barrel's on
No,
it?
he couldn't log, he's still trying to log on.
Oh, okay. I don't, how about Percedo, mayor? He's not on it.
No.
Through the chair, this is the study agency meeting, so it's the county supervisors only, and the next meeting is the governing board meeting.
I know, but you asked Mayor Percedo to say yes or no, didn't you?
Sorry, it was
I hear
Supervisor
him.
Pereira. I called Supervisor Pereira's name.
Oh, okay. I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And number 6 is other business? There's no other business? So take a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay. I think we're good. If Annette was close enough, she would hit me. But I'm just far enough away so she can't. So this meeting is adjourned.
You guys got to remember, I'm deaf in one ear and can't hear out the other, so that's the reason I get those mixed up. So.
Do we need to make any switches before we start?
Nope, we're good whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning. We'll go ahead and call the meeting of the San Joaquin Unified Air Pollution Control District Board to session. We have board members participating in person and via Zoom webinar. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, I want to review some important guidelines, general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell phone or desk phone. This will ensure that we are not hearing any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. During the meeting, all public participants, except for board members and district staff, will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Only the board members and staff will be visible on Zoom. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. After each item, the chair will announce public comment. There is a time limit of 3 minutes for each public comment. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. So at this time, we'll go to roll call.
Mr. Bessinger?
Here.
Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
Mr. Couch? Ms. Fagazi?
Here.
Mr. Mendez?
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Here.
Mr. Pereira?
Here.
Mr. Preciado?
Here.
Mr. Reyes?
Here.
Mr. Rickman?
Here.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Here.
Ms. Shuklian?
Here.
Mr. Wheeler?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
And I am here as well.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Very good. This time I would ask Mayor Bessinger to lead us in the flag salute.
Please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 is welcome new governing board members, Supervisor Vito Chiesa, Supervisor Robert Rickman, and Supervisor Amy Shuklian.
Well, thank you, and welcome to one of the 3 new members. The other ones I have some opinions on, the other 2, but we will, so because of that, we'll go to Supervisor Robert Rickman first. And would you please maybe just share a little bit with us about your history and your interests, and then the roast will begin.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know I talked to my predecessor, Bob Elliott, and he talked. He loved this board, so I know I've got some big shoes to fill. So thank you for having me. I'm 47, born and raised here in San Joaquin County, born and raised in Tracy. I'm currently a sergeant with Highway Patrol, and I look forward to working with the board. And I'm married, I have 2 teenage daughters that haven't been in school in 2 years, so.
Well, we certainly thank you for joining the board, and look forward to you. You've got some big shoes to fill, and please feel free to use the term common sense regularly, as we will be missing that from our previous board member. But thank you so much again for joining the board. Next, thank you. Next, this person I met early in my formative years, and she didn't do a very good job of educating me back in the Hanford High School days, but welcome to Supervisor Amy Shuklian.
Thank you, Craig. You just said it. Born and raised in, actually right on the Tulare-Kings County line, on the Hanford side of the line. So Craig and I graduated from high school together, but I think he's a little older than me, and I won't say how old I am. I'm currently chair of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. Like I said, born and raised, active. My brother still farms on the land that I grew up on, and I'm very excited to be a part of the governing board. And I think I might be a little less grumpy than the previous board member that represented Tulare County. And slightly taller.
Well, Amy, thanks so much for joining the board. We look forward to your leadership and, helping us move forward. Thank you so much. And then finally, Supervisor Vito Chiesa. Everywhere he goes, there's something incredible that happens, and probably our most incredible trip together was, and I don't say this in a demeaning way or anything. It was just one of those things that happens in life. But both he and I were participants in Farm Bureau boards in California, and we happened to be in Washington D.C. on 9/11 together, and got to experience that together, and to try and make our way back from the East Coast in different ways, and kept track of each other. But through Farm Bureau and his leadership, long leadership in his county role, we certainly welcome Supervisor Vito Chiesa.
Thank you, Chair. Vito Chiesa, just starting my fourth term on the Board of Supervisors here, currently serving as our chair. And my previous life, as Craig was alluding to, it's still my life, not my previous life, but I'm a farmer in the Houston area, which is east of Modesto. And I look forward, Kristen Olson, who was my predecessor on this board, and Bill O'Brien before, really wanted me to do this. And as chair, I was allowed to put myself on anything I wanted, so I chose to be. I was forced to be here, which, see how that goes. But exciting. I know most of you for the most part, and I'm excited to be on this. I know it's an important component of what we do in the Valley, and I'd like to take a regional approach. I believe in the regional approach, and this board will help.
Great, thank you. You're welcome. Okay, we will, does anybody want to provide any more fire to the roast that?
I'll say it because we're on a Zoom, teleconference meeting. I miss you, Amy. I miss you personally, where you can give me a bad time, because I love it.
Earlier you said you were physically here. You didn't mention anything about being mentally here, buddy, so.
There we go.
Yeah.
Good job, baby.
Yeah. All righty, thank you. We'll move on to item 5, the consent calendar. And these items are routine in nature and are usually approved by a single vote. Prior to action, the board will be given the opportunity to comment on any consent item. Are there any board members that wish to have any items removed and discussed separately? I don't see any. Do we have any members from the public?
We do have public comment from Claire Statham.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. And are your comments with respect to the consent calendar?
It is. I just had one question about item 17, operations statistics. And under outreach and planning, there's one entry that says educational activities provided, 363 of them. And I was just curious if someone could give me an example. I thought maybe those were social media posts or something like that, but I just wondered if someone could explain a little bit about what those were, the educational activities provided. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's quite a range of, this is Samir Sheikh, Air Pollution Control Officer. Just want to respond to the question. There's a range of activities that our outreach and communications team includes in those statistics. As the board knows, we interface, whether it's with schools, various community-based organizations, health agencies, more recently now with the AB 617 program, various communities under that program. So there's quite a range of activities that our team does in really trying to reach out. Social media posts are obviously another new major thing that we're involved in on a variety of platforms, Nextdoor, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and other platforms. Those would be many more orders of magnitude, probably greater than that number. But those are all just various levels of direct engagement with residents, other stakeholders that are interested in understanding air quality issues and part of the ongoing outreach campaign. So there's a lot of activity there. And over the course of the year, the board and the public will continue to hear, as we bring back various items on those various activities, more details about that. That's just the ongoing report we provide just to show the level of effort that goes into providing that information to the public.
Very good, thank you.
Through the chair, I see no further public comment on this item.
Okay, very good.
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have multiple motions and seconds. Please call the roll.
Mr. Vessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Ms. Vagazi?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco-Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Yes.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes? I'm sorry, Mr. Reyes? I can hear you. Thank you. Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
I vote aye.
Motion passes. Item number 6 is public comment.
Okay, this time is made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments on each board agenda item during the time allowed for public comment on that item. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. And also some information with regard to how we'll operate under the public comment section here. Members of the public participating via the webcast will be afforded the opportunity to address the governing board electronically during the appropriate comment periods by sending an email to webcast@valleyair.org. The clerk to the board will read emails received out loud into the public record up to 3 minutes. Members of the public on Zoom, please press participants button on the bottom of your screen and then raise your hand button on the participants list so that you may be recognized to speak. And members of the public participating in English by phone, please press *9 so that you may be recognized to speak. Also *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please be prepared to speak when your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number is called. Please state your name prior to beginning your public comments.
First is Connie Young.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Connie Young, a Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL. Thank you, as always, for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. My concern continues to be the impact that climate change is having on wildfires and therefore on our air quality. For that reason, I urge you to more boldly address climate change as well as forest management. Here are 2 studies that support this position. One study done at Stanford and UC San Diego found that between 2006 and 2018, the share of air pollution from sources like car and truck exhaust declined, while pollution from wildfire smoke roughly doubled. According to the researchers, the 2 major factors driving the increase in wildfire smoke are decades of fuel buildup due to fire suppression and the warming climate. They predict if nothing is done to better manage forests and slow climate change by slashing emissions, that within decades, exposure to wildfire smoke alone could become one of the deadliest climate impacts. The other study suggests that possibly within 20 to 30 years, forests may become carbon sources rather than carbon sinks. A carbon sink, as some of you know, is a place that stores carbon. Plants typically absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, but they also exhale CO2, particularly at night and when they are stressed by increasing temperatures. Research shows that there's a clear temperature limit around 64 degrees Fahrenheit, above which many trees start to exhale more CO2 than they can take in. Rising temperatures will increase the amount of CO2 trees release, further contributing to more global warming. It will be crucially important to consider this response to higher temperatures when developing and implementing effective forest management plans. I'll send you articles about both of these studies. To paraphrase author Anthony J. D'Angelo, when solving problems, dig at the roots instead of just hacking at the trees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Jenny Holterman.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jenny Holterman. I am a Kern County almond farmer, and I wanted to address you today regarding CARB further wanting to limit our ag burning. Our family farm, we are a small family farm in Kern County. We've been on the ag burn wait list since August 28th, waiting for an ag burn day. Just to clarify, our family does do whole orchard chipping, and we do shredding of our prunings as well. What we use ag burning for is our attrition, to burn attrition. We haven't had a burn day since August, so still have harvest attrition from our almond harvest. Sticks that were removed during harvest are still in piles waiting to be burned, as well as any fallen trees, sick and diseased trees that we've had to remove. Obvious reasons many of you are farmers can understand why we don't want to chip up sick or diseased trees. We would prefer to burn them. Unfortunately, because we haven't had a burn day in months, these burn piles keep getting larger and larger. We are a small family farm. Our fields are not all contiguous, so we have up to 8 piles accumulating in our various different fields. To have a shredder come to 8 or 9 different locations, they charge a minimum of $2,000 per location to come and shred. And shredders are used to chipping, prunings, not giant burn piles. So this can be very cost prohibitive for a farmer, and wanting to take care of sick and diseased trees in the best manner that is good for our farms and for our soil is to do ag burning. So I know this has been a long time that we have been sitting on this wait list, and we would appreciate some consideration to not limit this further, but to allow ag burning on these beautiful days that we have, such as today, where it's 70 degrees and sunny. We would appreciate your consideration to further allow burn attrition in orchards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Andrea de Zubaria.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Yes, my name is Andrea Farber de Zubaria, and I want to thank you for the chance to share my concerns. It's my first time at this meeting. My husband and I have lived in Fresno for 23 years, and we both work in healthcare. I work as a physical therapist, and he's a primary care doctor. We raised our children here, and we love the diverse community and the low-pressure lifestyle, and we like to bike, hike, garden, cook, and socialize outdoors when the air permits. I'm increasingly distressed about the many unhealthy air days. We want to encourage our patients to exercise outside for their mental and physical health, but it's often unsafe. I'd like to see my children return to Fresno to contribute their talents here and allow me to be close to my grandchildren, but how can I encourage them to come to a place with notorious asthma rates? I know that you are all concerned about this too, or you wouldn't be doing this work, and I certainly appreciate what you do. But as far as I know, this agency has not been incorporating rising temperatures and climate change into the equation of what needs to be addressed. For example, I imagine that we can all agree that wildfire smoke worsens air quality. In 2018, the retiring CAL FIRE chief, Ken Pimlott, told KVPR and the New York Times that our firefighters live climate change every day. Another example, the CDC says our longer warm seasons lead to more allergens and air pollutants and an increase in ozone. And as you know, this diminishes lung capacity, sending people to the ER, increasing hospitalizations and deaths. So I ask, how can we resolve a serious problem like poor air quality without objectively analyzing its causes? I respectfully ask that information about rising global temperatures and climate change be added to your website and considered in your agenda when addressing the problem of our Central Valley air quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Claire Statham.
Good morning. My name is Claire Statham. I have advocated for a number of years banning fireplace burning in all urban and suburban, not rural, areas within the board's jurisdiction. As such a ban would probably cause some public pushback, I and others have asked the district to develop an aggressive education program that informs the public about the effects of wood smoke on human health. So I have been very pleased this winter to see on Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, and on the Valley Air website itself a more direct, honest message about the harm of residential wood burning and the need for all of us to refrain from it. The statement in the December 2020 edition of Valley Air News says exactly what needs to be said. Well done. But disseminating this information is still a challenge. I don't think many of the general public read Valley Air News. The district's posts on social media are seldom shared, and they need to be seen by many, many more people. Therefore, I have the following suggestions if they have not already been taken up. 1. Submit December's Valley Air News statement to the Fresno Bee, GV Wire, and every organization you can think of that has a newsletter. Think big. Chamber of Commerce, health organizations, fraternal and social service organizations, churches, unions. You would be surprised how many of them would print that statement. 2, go on every local talk show and radio magazine that will host the district's information officers and promote the message of that December statement. Check before you burn should not be the focus of its underlying message, because that message says it's okay to burn sometimes, and we should be moving away from that statement. 3, most of you board members have a presence on Twitter and Facebook. As members of this board, you have authority on the issue of air quality and should be posting the district's message about wood burning and asking your constituents to share and retweet the messages. 4, when doing that, prepare yourself to answer people who question the district's "don't burn wood" message. Some will think having a fire in their urban or suburban home is their choice. Ask them if they can keep their fire inside their own home so it affects only them. Well, of course they can't. Do their neighbors have a choice about breathing the toxic smoke that settles around their home? Please know the facts from the December newsletter and learn what wood smoke does to children's lungs and causes asthma, bronchitis, and other ailments, even in healthy people who breathe smoke-laden air in the winter. Not many of your constituents will tell you, "Oh, I don't care about my neighbors and their kids." I congratulate the Air District for its honest message, and I urge all of you to use your social media accounts to get out the message that breathing wood smoke is harmful, whether it comes from a wildfire in the summer or a fireplace in the winter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Janet Dietzkamay.
Good morning, board members and Chair Peterson. This is Janet Dietzkamay, and I'm sharing my thoughts on climate change. I would like to start by saying my grandparents were born here in the Valley in the 1800s and were members of the agricultural community. If any group should be aware of climate change, it's people involved in the agricultural industry. Weather patterns have been changing for the past 2 decades. We have less rain, we have hotter summers, we have longer summers, we have drier air, we have more La Nina events. Conditions for growing are not the same as they were 20 or more years ago. Just in the last 17 years since my husband and I moved here, the number of nights below 32 degrees during the winter has greatly lessened. I remember November nights going down to the high 20 degrees, requiring us to pick lemons off of our lemon tree early. For the past few years, we leave the lemons on the tree until we pick them to give to family and friends. We pick them in December or early January. Very unusual from when we first moved here. Yes, they're sweeter and juicier, but the change in climate is causing a change in the lemon picking. My parents had an egg-laying chicken ranch with 3,000 chickens. We had the ranch in Sonoma County where the temperature conditions were more suited to egg production. We used to have sprinklers in our chicken houses to cool the chickens on very occasionally hot days. Now the summer temperatures are hotter. I can predict, as I know people still who live in Sonoma County, that sprinklers are used more often in the egg-laying industry, as there are more hot days in Sonoma County, far more than there were when we were farming. Farming based upon growing fruit, nuts, vegetables, and the other items in the valley are affected by climate change conditions. I'm sure those in the industry have experienced, are knowledgeable of it, know this. Spring comes early, summer is longer, even stretching to the end of October now. Rain is unpredictable. Conditions are changed. Climate change is affecting all facets of life, including the agricultural industry. We need to focus on climate change and its effects, especially on our forests, where the trees are dying from the beetles that no longer like the climate that they are experiencing now. Climate change is important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Happy belated New Year. I wanted just to take these couple minutes and speak to you as a Valley resident, as a born and raised Madarian, if you might call me that. But as an asthmatic, I have experienced the health effects of living here in the Valley. I had, from a young age, developed chronic bronchitis that eventually led to asthma. And it definitely led to some restrictions in my life. I moved to the coast and went to college there and experienced a breath of fresh air. But I came back to the Valley and because I love the Valley. It's my home. It's born and raised here. My family is here. So much deep love for the Valley. And I want to just echo the comments that have been made about including climate change in your legislative platform, in your budgets. It's extremely important. I want to see clean air for the Valley, for my family, for all of you, for everybody that's living in the Valley and breathing this air. And I also echo Claire's comments that this winter communication has been extremely increased, and I've seen it. So congratulations to the communication staff on that. It's been refreshing to see a lot more communications being done on that end. I would definitely like to see some of that more in Spanish. I'm definitely in those two realms and watching both Spanish news and English news. So would love to see some of that also being incorporated, as well as in other languages. I know Hmong is extremely relevant in Fresno, so would like to see some of that as well. And yeah, those are just my comments. I as a Valley resident speaking here, I'd like to encourage you all to take these recommendations that are being made by these other residents as well, and include them into your legislative and communication strategies and budget strategies as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, there's no further comment on this item. Item number 7 is star recognition, service, teamwork, attitude, and respect.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Shanika Dixon, Director of Personnel. I'm glad to be here and I'm glad to bring this item when we have new board members that have joined us today. It's a perfect start. So as you are aware, recognition of employees' contributions is an important component of the district's STAR work culture. Today, we would like to formally recognize and show appreciation to those employees who have reached a service milestone here in the fourth quarter of 2020. So although we wish we could see everyone here like we normally do, we have a packed room, we do have a number of employees who have joined us virtually, and you will start seeing them show up on the screen here. Before I continue with the recognitions, I just want to thank all of you for your service to the district, for your commitment to the district, and for the years that you've given to the district. We really appreciate you and appreciate your contribution. So first off, I'll start with 5 years of service, recognizing Martin Velasco, Senior Air Quality Instrument Technician, Crystal Martinez, Office Services Manager, Cassandra Melching, Air Quality Education Representative, and Michael Corder, Senior Air Quality Specialist. Recognizing the following individuals for 10 years of service: Donnie Hockett, Air Quality Assistant, Bethany Whitney, Office Assistant, Lily Liu, Programmer Analyst, Cecilia Rocha, Programmer Analyst. 15 years of service, we have Noemi Calderon, Office Assistant. And 20 years of service, Patia Siong, Supervising Air Quality Specialist, and Colette Kincaid, Senior Air Quality Specialist. Thank you all for your service. Thank you very much.
Item number 8 is receive and file comprehensive annual financial report and single audit report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Mary Barati, Director of Administrative Services, who will be leading us through this item, and just wanted to thank her and her entire finance team for all the hard work that they do to make sure the Air District is always doing a good job in terms of public accountability and transparency when it comes to our finances. So with that, Mary, if you could introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samir. Good morning, board members. I'm Mary Brody, Director of Admin Services, and I'm here to present to you the district's comprehensive annual financial report and the single audit report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. The district finance team prepares these reports annually, and the comprehensive annual report is a CAFR, and these reports have certain sections they require to have the financial statements, the related notes, as well as some supplementary sections in accordance with governmental accounting standards, as well as Government Finance Officers Association's GFOA's best practices. PricePage CPAs is our external auditors. They have completed their annual audit report and also prepared the single audit report. The district receives some federal funds. Any entity that receives over $750,000 of federal funds in a year are required to complete these audits in accordance with the Single Audit Act and governmental auditing standards. I'm pleased to inform you and congratulate you for district receiving once again a clean audit report, best score possible with no finding, no instance of non-compliance, or no reportable matter. We have Mr. Fausto Hinojosa, the managing partner of CPA, PricePage CPAs, with us today. He's going to join us online to answer any questions and also provide some more detail about the audit process and the result. But before I hand it over, I wanted to thank your board for always being the best and the first in everything, for always raising the bar for us and always wanting us to be transparent to the public. And we always strive to be the best in everything, including the financial reporting. So thank you and congratulations. And I want to hand it to Mr. Fausto Hinojosa. Is he online now? Thank you.
I'm here. Thank you, Ms. Barati. Appreciate that introduction. Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. It's my pleasure to join you this morning to present the results of the June 30, 2020 financial audit, as well as the federal compliance audit. I have a short PowerPoint presentation that will help guide my thoughts, and my plan is to be brief and efficient. I have room at the end for questions, but please feel free to interrupt me if any questions come up as I'm making my presentation. Very quickly, the agenda for my few minutes here, I'd like to just briefly describe to you a little bit about the firm, Price Page and Company that is auditing you, the audit process, the areas of emphasis this year in the audit, the auditor's reports that were issued. There were 3 of them. Just a very quick look at some key financial statement items, communications that are required by generally accepted auditing standards, and again, some time for discussion or questions. So moving to the next slide, please. Very briefly here, Price Page and Company is located in Clovis. We're one of the top 10 firms here in the area. I've been around since 1976. Our area of expertise is governmental accounting, municipal counties, municipalities, counties, special districts. We were your auditors probably 7 or 8 years ago, and there was rotation, and we're glad to be back with the district. We also performed the audit last year. We have 42 employees here in the Clovis area. Moving to the next slide, please. So as Ms. Barati explained, I'm the engagement partner. My job is to plan the audit, to ensure that the audit procedures are carried out in accordance with professional standards, to sign the audit report. Also, on this morning with me is Osvaldo Gutierrez, who's also CPA. He was the engagement manager, and our senior in-charge auditor in the field was Jorge Rodriguez. We had some additional staff members, over 45 years of experience applied to the audit of your financial statements. Next slide, please. So audit process, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to talk about audit process. I know that all of you serve in leadership roles at the various counties, cities, and in other roles. So this may not be new to you. However, I like to share what the auditor is thinking and how that process works. So the auditor's job is to assess the risks of both error and fraud. There was a time when auditors were afraid to say, and the auditing standards, in fact, were not very clear or specific about the auditor's responsibilities for fraud. That changed several years ago as a result of a standard, an auditing standard that was issued that said, in fact, the public expects and demands that auditors be on the lookout, certainly for fraud, and that they not only be interested in errors. And so our job at the very beginning of the audit is to obtain an understanding of the district's financial operations, to obtain an understanding of internal control policies and procedures. With respect to internal controls, we ask 2 questions. Number 1, are the controls effectively designed? And so that means, do you have policies and procedures that are properly designed, properly written, properly communicated? Secondly, though, it's one thing to have policies and procedures that are effectively designed, and it's a different matter to determine whether those policies and procedures are being followed. So as auditors, we want to know that the policies are appropriate, the procedures are appropriate, but we also need to know whether they are being implemented, whether in fact management, the accounting department, others within the organization are following those internal controls. If we identify areas of internal control that are weaknesses and that are not being followed, then we understand that there is a risk of misstatement in the financial statements. There is a risk of error, and there may be a risk of fraud. And based on our assessment of the controls and of the financial operations, we then develop audit procedures to determine whether anything has gone wrong, whether there is any misappropriation of assets, whether there is any financial misreporting, again, based on either error or fraud. So that is how that process works. We can move to the next slide. Areas of emphasis in this year's audit. It's important to note that auditors are required to incorporate an element of unpredictability. What that means is that management, your accounting department, should not know exactly what we're doing. That only makes sense in an audit. That said, there has to be coordination between the auditor and your accounting team. And so a lot of the information requests, a lot of the things that we are looking at, we do have to let them know in advance. Here are some of those things that we're going to be looking at. However, we might hold back with some of the requests. We might just show up. Although in COVID, there were different ways that we did this because of the social distancing and other issues that occurred during this past year. But we did incorporate an element of unpredictability as required by the auditing standards. And these were the areas that we focused on. And you'll see and you understand and know that these were the significant numbers basically in the financial statements. Cash and investments, your revenues and receivables, expenditures, including salaries, the net pension liability, and also the federal award program, the federal compliance audit. So we can move to the next slide, please. Ms. Barati has already shared some of this with you, but so you can hear it directly from the auditor. You did receive an unmodified or clean opinion. The audit was performed in accordance with AICPA and government auditing standards. Those are two different sets of auditing standards. Financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. So we bolded and highlighted fairly presented and material. An audit, as you understand, is not an audit of 100% of transactions. That would be cost prohibitive and inefficient. And so we perform tests on samples of information that we believe are representative of the population. And that gives us a statistical basis to be able to rely on our testing and to be able to issue an opinion that the financial statements are in fact fairly presented. Significant accounting policies have been consistently applied. In some of the frauds and financial reporting frauds that you might hear about with respect to publicly traded companies, typically, some of those frauds are performed by changing accounting policies from year to year so that the numbers can be changed. And so if there was a situation where accounting policies were changed with the specific intent of trying to mislead the reader or user of the financial statements, then we would report that to you, but we're pleased to report that that is not the case. Also, there are a number of estimates in the financial statements, and our job with respect to estimates is to determine whether those estimates are reasonable and whether they're based on reasonable input factors. And we find that they are in fact reasonable and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Also, there are a number of footnotes to the financial statements that are prepared accurately and meet the requirement of understandability so that a reader can better comprehend the financial information in the financial statements. So if this is a report card, I would call it an A+. Moving forward, please. So key financial statement items, we don't have a slide here, and I don't know if we can very quickly shift to the CAFR. And again, I don't plan to go into a lot of detail, but I would like to take a brief look at page 7 of the CAFR if there is a way for that to happen. And if not, I can just move forward.
We don't have it up fast, though, but yeah.
Okay, that's okay. So just a couple of items then, and certainly the CAFR was presented to you. You all have a copy of it. It's online. It's a part of the agenda. And just a couple of things to note on the balance sheet. The balance sheet lists the assets and liabilities, $621 million of cash at June 30, certainly your largest asset. And the largest liability of the organization, and we'll talk about a little bit later, is also the pension liability with about just over $100 million. Federal expenditures were $7.4 million. So they make up a small portion of all of the revenue of your organization, which was over $400 million in the fiscal year that we audited. So we'll move to the next slide. Government auditing standards. So I've been talking really about the financial statements and the opinion on the financial statements, but there is a report that is required by government auditing standards. And that report includes two sections, one on internal control and one on compliance. With respect to internal control, if we identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in those internal controls, we're required to report those not only to management, but to those charged with governance, is the term in the auditing literature. Your board is, in fact, charged with governance, and so we are required to report to you whether we identify any deficiencies or not. And we're pleased to report that no deficiencies in your internal controls were identified, and also no non-compliance that might have an impact on your financial statements was identified. Moving to the next slide. Federal Uniform Guidance. This is the federal compliance audit. As I shared, $7.4 million in federal expenditures. We issued an unmodified or clean opinion. With respect to federal grants, there is a laundry list of compliance requirements that's put together by, in your case, EPA and OMB. And there are a lot of compliance requirements that they want us to audit to ensure that you are meeting their requirements with respect to allowability of federal expenditures. And they also want us to specifically look at controls over those federal compliance requirements, separate and distinct from the financial statement audit. And so we issued this separate report, and here also you received an unmodified opinion on compliance and no deficiencies in internal control over compliance. The schedule of expenditures of federal awards was fairly stated in relation to the financial statement. And again, this was a separate report that was issued and that you have a copy of. Moving forward. So I think this will be our last slide. Required communications under the auditing standards, significant accounting policies. There were no changes. Significant estimates. There are two significant estimates in the financial statements: depreciation expense and net pension liability, and then a sensitive disclosure regarding the pension plan. So the pension liability that's reported in your financial statements is an actuarially calculated liability or estimate. And so our job as auditors is, we're not actuaries, so we cannot reperform their work, but our job is to determine whether the inputs that they use to calculate that liability were accurate. And so we perform tests of the data that they were provided to ensure that they received accurate information. And then we perform certain other procedures over the liability to determine whether it is fairly stated and reported in the financial statements. And we're pleased to report that that estimate is in fact fairly stated and reported. We encountered no difficulties in performing the audit. If management was not transparent or did not respond to inquiries, things of that sort, then we would be required to report those to you. But we're pleased to report that we had no issues with cooperation or transparency. There were no significant audit adjustments identified. And so that means that in the audit process, we did not identify any errors. The financial accounting that was performed by the district's accounting team was excellent, and no audit adjustments or errors were identified. We had no disagreements with management. They did not go out and opinion shop, as we call it in the audit industry, or pressure us to report something in a way that we did not feel was appropriate. And finally, no fraud or illegal acts that were identified in our audit procedures. So hopefully this report was boring, and if you're going to hear an audit report, it should be, because if there's excitement around an audit report, then that may not be a good one. So a clean report card here. The district accounting team and entire management team should be commended because the operations are significant, and receiving not only an unmodified opinion, but having internal controls that properly safeguard the organization are of utmost importance. And so they are to be commended for maintaining that high level of financial accountability. I'm glad to answer any questions that the board might have.
Very good, thank you. Mary, do you have any other comments?
No comments, just wanted to thank the audit team as well, and of course the leadership of Samir. And we couldn't do anything here without his strong leadership and all support.
Very good, thank you. Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, this is Supervisor Mendez. I just wanted to say hi to Fausto and thank you very much. You guys always do great work, and again, you found what I think most of this board suspected, that our accounting people are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Very good. Any other board member questions?
I'd like to say something, if you don't mind, Craig.
Sure.
Tom Wheeler.
Supervisor Wheeler.
Yeah. I got two from Fausto 2 days in a row at our transportation meeting. Yesterday, they also done the audit, and I can't tell you how good of a job they do. And they couldn't do that good of a job if our staff wasn't doing that good of a job. So I thank the transportation crew, and I'm thanking the airborne crew. You guys do a heck of a job to keep a handle on our dollars, and I think we divvy them out as good as anybody does in any of the counties or anything else. So thank you, Fausto.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Mary, thank you for setting the stage for a relatively boring report from the auditor, and thanks to the auditor for the good work. I just wanted to point out, I think it's an excellent report in our agenda material, particularly introducing work and how work is done in the district for our three newer board members, and to remind the rest of us. I think it's a great exposition about the structure of the district, different management positions, and I thank the staff for putting that together, and I think it's well worth everybody taking a second look at.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I know there's a screen right in front of me. I can look at that, right? Mayor Preciado.
Mayor Preciado, I think you're muted. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
we hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to thank the auditor team and also the district staff for performing an excellent job in the audit. It is very hard work. It needs a lot of attention and a lot of communication. Once again, I just want to thank for the great job you guys do, and transparency is one of the key issues for getting the community trust, the public trust, and we're really working hard on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't think we have any other questions or comments from board members other than mine, and with respect to everything other than being boring, I mean, for the new board members, the amount of money that flows through to the public to improve air quality. I know with so many of the comments talking about improving air quality and the hundreds of millions of dollars that this board aggressively seeks to go out and fund our mission is substantial, and just always want to thank our staff for being so efficient and professional and in everything they do, and I mean, when you're dealing with the public's money, it's just vital that we be squeaky clean, and again, we thank you all for that. I will. Do we have public comment?
Through the chair, I do not see public comment on this item.
Very good. Do we need to receive a vote to receive this, or is this an action item? Okay. Very good.
Item number 9 is approve the district's 2021 legislative platform. And through the chair, Supervisor Couch has joined the meeting.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Samir Sheikh, the Air Pollution Control Officer, and I'm going to introduce Tom Jordan here in a minute, the Senior Policy Advisor who really plays a lead role in helping put this strategy together and leading efforts on the legislative and policy front. Before I turn over to Tom, I wanted to just kind of introduce the item here and really set the stage for the proposed platform for the coming year. And really just by starting first with a little bit of a reminder on who the Air District is and how we as an agency at the local level relate to the state and federal governments, and really to articulate the importance of the coordination and various levels of advocacy that go on, and how those all sort of tie together and help and accomplish our mission. I believe we've lost a PowerPoint presentation here. Luckily, I did print slides, and so I'll just continue as that gets brought back up.
There you go.
There it is. Okay. So as a reminder, we are the local agency, a county agency that's in charge with cleaning the air here in our air basin, the San Joaquin Valley. We develop plans to bring the region into attainment. We develop regulations to implement those plans. We play a part of a role in implementing those plans, in that our jurisdiction is primarily over what are called stationary sources. And of course, I think this is of no surprise or news to the majority of folks that are listening to this right now, but I really just wanted to make sure we had a good background here as we jump into the platform. So that's our primary authority, and then we operate, as Chair Peterson just noted, a variety of growing and very important incentive programs to reduce mobile source emissions, over which we don't have direct regulatory jurisdiction, but make up the majority of our air pollution, and of course really need some boost to accelerate transition to cleaner technologies in various fleets that operate up and down the valley. Now, the federal EPA, they set the standards that our agency is tasked with meeting, and they also have a primary regulatory jurisdiction role in reducing emissions from the variety of mobile sources that significantly impact the valley: trucks, locomotives, airplanes, boats, other vehicles. And so they also have a very important role in overseeing the plans and rules that we adopt, and actually approving those and setting various requirements and various sets of guidance for how that basically operates under the Clean Air Act. And then CARB at the state level is really the other half of our plans that we put together. They develop programs to reduce emissions also from mobile sources. They have a very unique role in the country, given their history, our history here in California, in establishing mobile source standards. They actually have an ability to establish standards. Other states can basically follow that process under the Clean Air Act. And they also, in our plans, basically commit to reducing those emissions, and they, our plan sort of rolls up into a combined plan with the state, and they also approve the various plans and rules that we put together. And then lastly, I wanted to note, and I know a lot of the board members serve in various capacities as it relates to transportation and land use, but cities and counties are the primary authorities when it comes to land use planning, as well as transportation and transit, other transportation-related planning. And there's obviously a lot of interplay with our agency and other local agencies when it comes to those issues as well. So given the challenges that we have as an area in having to meet various air quality standards, and obviously you heard from many members of the public earlier on the strong interest in continuing to really move forward with our clean air public health mission, we have a very long history here in our region of developing various strategies to really improve the air quality, numerous plans, a number of different regulations. Just last month, the board adopted a number of new strategies aimed at continuing to reduce emissions from various sources under the board's jurisdiction. A lot of innovative measures. In fact, this board has adopted many of the first of their type measures to reduce emissions. One of the big examples related to that also, and I'll mention it again, is really the innovation that the board exhibits when it comes to the incentive programs that we operate. Over $3 billion now have been invested in clean air projects through those various incentive programs, and every year we continue to actually increase the amount of funding that's available to those, as well as the distribution of those funds throughout the valley to various partners that we work with to implement those. Stationary source emissions, that again, that's the various industries that we regulate, manufacturing, agriculture, other sectors that all fall under this umbrella of stationary source categories. We've reduced NOx emissions, which is the primary precursor for both ozone and PM, the two main areas that we focus on in terms of air quality challenge. We've reduced those emissions by over 90% over the years that we've been regulating those sources, and mobile sources do make up the majority of remaining emissions, and you'll hear this a little bit later as we talk about disadvantaged communities. But when you look at near source impacts at the community level, if you happen to be, say, near a freeway or older vehicles, some of the biggest sources of toxic air contaminants, diesel particulate matter and others, or come from mobile sources. So it's really important that we continue to look for ways to reduce emissions from mobile sources. And we can't meet our mandates without strong state and federal support. And that's really where the legislative platform comes in. It's a very important part of the region's ability to secure resources, to enhance policies, and really have our partners get involved in doing what they can do in addition to what we do at the local level to do some really important and actually vital actions to help us with our air quality mission. So every year at the beginning of the year, the board puts together and approves our legislative platform. It helps guide our efforts here at the district in working with other Valley partners on our advocacy position in support of our mission. It's got our top priorities for the upcoming legislative session. You're going to hear in a minute from Tom about those various priorities and principles that guide us when we are considering taking positions on various legislative and regulatory proposals. And as those of you know, those that have been engaged in Sacramento or back east, particularly in Sacramento recently, but I think also at the federal level, there's a lot of action that's been going on, a lot of legislative work that in some ways touches what we do here from an air quality perspective. A lot of opportunities is how we see it to really advocate for things like resources for the incentive programs. That's going to be a big part of the theme that you'll hear today. Policies to assist our disadvantaged communities. Here, as we all know, the San Joaquin Valley is home to the top and most disadvantaged communities anywhere in the state. And of course, that requires a lot of attention and resources to be able to assist in continuing to enhance the quality of life in all of our communities. We also want to continue to work and look for solutions and ideas for enhancing the way the Clean Air Act is implemented. We have a lot of challenges, obviously, in addressing various federal standards. That's a big area, an ongoing area of focus for us. When it comes to the open burning of agricultural waste, that's a big priority, something that this board has always taken a very proactive role in really looking for alternatives to open burning. Last month, there was a very comprehensive report on that. It's an ongoing issue. It's something that we really urge our state and federal partners to get involved in really helping us come up with those solutions and to fund those solutions. And you'll hear more about that in a little bit here from Tom. And then lastly, the resources and policies that we need to help move forward and to put into place to reduce the air quality impacts that come from these large wildfires through better forest management and really looking for a comprehensive approach to enhancing the way that our wildlands are managed and really trying to get ahead as much as we can and really dealing with decades of forest mismanagement and trying to help with that situation. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Tom, who's going to walk the board and the public here through the various priorities that are in the ledge platform. With that, Tom.
All right, thanks, Samir, for the overview and the introduction. So what I'm going to do is go through the 2021 priorities in the platform, and then I'll introduce our advocates that we work with in Sacramento and DC for a little bit more information about the environment we're working in as we pursue these issues. The first item in the platform is general statement that the district will continue to pursue funding for clean air projects to reduce emissions in the valley, particularly in the valley's disadvantaged communities. There are a variety of funding sources that we access, and we continue to look for others, including the cap and trade program at the state, the DMV fees that we've relied upon here in the valley, and a variety of other sources. At the federal level, it includes funding from EPA through the DERA and Targeted Airshed program, the Farm Bill. There will be a transportation bill coming up, and that's another area we look for. And so this is a broad statement that we will continue those efforts and look for funding to meet our needs wherever we can find them. The second item is definitely related to that, but we want to ensure that the state of California secures and allocates the incentive funds necessary to meet the commitments they made in our recently adopted PM 2.5 plan. The state made some very large commitments to turn over off-road agricultural equipment and trucks in the valley, and we continue to make sure that they're working to secure the funding necessary to meet those commitments, and we help where we can to push them forward in that area. I mentioned cap and trade funding. The cap and trade program has provided a significant funding in recent years to air quality programs and to our incentive programs. The dynamics around that funding source have changed. Originally, it was a fee-based program, and expenditures had to be related to the collection of those fees. The extension of cap and trade turned it into a tax, and so the state has a lot of latitude in how they spend those funds, so we continue to push them to make sure that they're spending them on air quality programs and reducing emissions. And I'll talk a little bit about the budget later, and you'll see we've had some success at that in the governor's office. AB 617 is a fairly new program that's been expanding, and we want to make sure the state is funding that program adequately so we can assist our disadvantaged communities. The Valley has 3 communities that have been identified under 617, and there's discussion of others being added. The air districts in the state actually opposed the adoption of 617, not because we thought it was a bad idea, but we were concerned about the state's commitment to fund it, and so we continue to push to make sure the state is providing not only funds for the districts operating that program for our staffing costs, but also for the incentives that are necessary to continue to clean the air in those communities. Also, we have some general statement about disadvantaged communities, stating that we're, supportive and looking for ways to provide incentives to those communities and to continue to work on those communities while not targeting them in any way that would slow economic development in those areas as well. We also have identified the Clean Air Act as an area of emphasis at the federal level. We work with EPA on a variety of issues, with approval of our plans, with exceptional events demonstrations, and other things that need to be approved. Over the years, there's really been a challenge in getting through that administrative process. And so we continue to look for ways to work with EPA to make sure that they are holding up their end of the bargain in approving our plans and moving things along in a timely fashion. Also, at the federal level, as Samir mentioned earlier, we have the obligation to do the clean air plans for the Valley, but we have limited authority. And the federal government actually has some significant areas that are under their area of jurisdiction. And that's heavy-duty motor vehicles, locomotives, aircraft, and ships are under federal jurisdiction, basically things that are involved in interstate commerce. And so we want to make sure that EPA is doing its part to set national standards to reduce emissions from their sources. In particular, for areas like us that need those reductions, we'd rather see a national program than a carved-out program that's targeted only at our region. We think it's only fair that everyone's complying with those standards that are needed to meet our air quality goals. At the state level, there was a bill passed about a year and a half ago, I guess, to set up an inspection and maintenance program for heavy-duty trucks. That's really important for us to meet our goals, but we want to make sure the state implements that in a way that is workable for the trucking industry and doesn't lead to a lot of downtime or bureaucratic processes for the trucking industry to go through. The state is still in the process of finalizing how that program will work, and we want to make sure they do it in an efficient way that gets the emission reductions that we need. There were a few comments earlier about greenhouse gas measures, and the district is supportive of greenhouse gas measures that assist us in meeting our local criteria pollutant and toxic air emission needs here in the valley. We do make a statement, though, that if there are state or federal actions for climate change that negatively impact our ability to meet those requirements, we would oppose those measures. For the most part, a lot of measures are beneficial on both sides, but there are some things, particularly when you look at timing of emission reductions, that can be a disbenefit to air quality, and we want to make sure we're cognizant of those as well as the issues that are beneficial for both. On that front, there's a lot of discussion about near zero and zero emission vehicle technologies. And we basically want to be fuel neutral when we look forward to meeting our goals. Where zero emission technologies work, we're interested in deploying those technologies, but where they're not available yet, we can't wait for those new technologies to come online. We need to pursue near zero emission technologies in the near term to meet our air quality goals on the timeframes that are necessary. Many of those near zero emission technologies are 90% cleaner than current technology, so we want to deploy those where zero emissions not currently available. I mentioned earlier that there was a lot of discussion around a new transportation bill, and there have been a number of coalitions that are looking for developing clean transportation corridors program for fueling infrastructure. We've been involved in some of those discussions and are supportive of that as long as, I mentioned earlier, that's a fuel neutral approach that allows for things like natural gas and other technologies that we need here in the valley. Also, there are efforts to include funding in both the transportation bill and other federal agencies for the development of near zero and zero emission heavy duty vehicles and the deployment of those, and we're supportive of those issues as well. At the state level, there are two important programs that are set to sunset in the next couple of years. One of them is one of the oldest incentive programs, the Carl Moyer program. We're supportive of extending that program, and basically that program is funded from a variety of funding sources and is used to replace vehicles. A lot of our oldest incentive programs come out of the Carl Moyer program, and it still is relevant today as when it was adopted years ago. It's actually been reauthorized a couple of times. Related to that, the district also has authority for some additional funds, recognizing our challenge in the valley through DMV fees, and we're supporting the extension of that as well, and are looking for opportunities to move that forward to a later date, more in line with the deadlines that we have with attainment. The original deadline was pegged to our attainment deadline for the 8-hour ozone standard, and now the standards are going much beyond that, and we're looking to extend those DMV fees to support those other air quality plans. Providing information to the public is vital, especially during wildfires. The Air District has been a leader in getting information out to the public in real time about smoke impacts and what they should do in response to those smoke impacts. The state legislature has found this as an area of interest to them, and we want to make sure that as they go forward, they aren't inhibiting our program. And you know, if they're enhancing it, great, but we want to make sure they're aware of what we're doing as any of those discussions happen, which have over the last couple of years. But we think it's vital to get good information out, and we want to make sure that it's an effective program and responsive to our public. Samir mentioned earlier agricultural waste and the burn report that was recently adopted. we have a number of provisions to support the phase out of agricultural burning, including funding support for alternatives to ag burning, changes in energy policy that allow some of the alternatives to be I guess, effective and available. And then also, we think there needs to be a broader coalition of people talking about the issues surrounding ag waste and how to move these things forward. So we're recommending that the state set up a kind of multi-jurisdictional group, including ag stakeholders and others, to look at what new alternatives need to be developed to deal with this important issue. While most of our incentive programs are designed to take technologies that are available and get them into the fleets as fast as possible, we also see the need to continue to develop new technologies that maybe aren't ready for prime time yet. So we are supportive of programs to advance technology and bring the next generation of vehicles and engines online. And so this measure is really kind of the cutting edge, less about deployment, more about technology advancement, but securing funding for that. Wildfires is a very complicated issue with a lot of facets, but this board has long supported better forest management techniques to avoid the catastrophic impact of wildfires. So this measure includes everything from funding to support of the joint stewardship agreement that California and the federal government signed to treat 1 million acres per year in our forest land. It's supporting the funding needed to do those projects, supporting the policy changes needed to make sure those projects happen. And it's we've been involved in this for a while, and it's a very complicated issue in actually making those forest management activities happen. A couple of other things just that are on the radar that weren't items in the platform, but we continue to monitor what's going on as far as COVID-19 response, and the Air District as a special district. We've been involved in some discussions and making sure that some of the federal money that flows down to help fund those activities that the district is eligible for. Those activities have been focused on the money that goes to the state, not to the counties or local jurisdictions. So we're not looking at diverting money from any other local agencies, but we are trying to make sure that any of our costs are eligible for reimbursement under those activities. So once the board approves the platform, the district usually schedules meetings to follow up with our representatives to make sure they're aware of our priorities and to start looking at bills as they come in and start weighing in where appropriate. I did want to talk briefly at the federal level. Every 4 years or every 8 years, depending on how things go, there's a new administration to deal with back in DC. And one of the important things we think this year to highlight is that new administration really needs to understand the unique challenges we face as a district. And so that's one of our big priorities at the federal level, is to start discussions with EPA and others back in DC, so we're sure that they understand the issues we face, make sure that they're primed to take action on plans that they already have, understand our exceptional events demonstration, are streamlining wherever they can to move those things along. And it's just a really important process. We're starting to see some of the appointments made. Some of them are people we're familiar with, but we definitely need to get right on that. That's a little bit of a challenge through COVID, but so early in the year, we think it'll be more of a remote electronic type access to EPA, but hopefully towards the end of the year, there may be some opportunities for some in-person meetings as well. The last thing I wanted to mention before I turn it over to our advocates to weigh in on the environment and some other issues is the state budget. I mentioned some of our activities to try to bring incentive funds to the Valley, and the district works with a variety of folks to try to make the funding that comes to the Valley a reality, including our stakeholders, our legislative delegation, our advocates in Sacramento and in DC. But for the state budget this year, the work has really been ongoing and very active as the governor developed his proposal for the 2021-22 budget. We've been very successful at getting funds in there for our air quality programs. The farmer program, one thing with cap and trade this year is it's really a 2-year allocation for most categories. They did not provide funding last year because of COVID and uncertainty about the amount of funds. The farmer program in the previous year that it was funded was about $50 million. We typically get about 80% of the farmer funds that are allocated in the state budget. This year, the governor's proposal is $170 million. This is way higher than we've been able to get other than the very first 2 years of farmer. And we were very happy to be able to get that allocated at that point moving forward. Almost half of those funds are available as early action, or being proposed to be made available as early action in the state budget, which would be available before the 2021-22 budget proposal goes forward. Also, talking about ag burning, there's $30 million statewide for the Healthy Soils program. We see this as a potential opportunity for like whole orchard recycling and other things to help fund those activities. So we thought that was a positive outcome. There's included $50 million for the air districts to implement AB 617. So that's for the air district cost. That's the same amount that's been in the budget the last few years. The state has added communities, but given how things have gone, we think it's a victory to have that money in there as well. We continue to basically let the state know of what the ongoing costs are for us and other air districts around the state for 617, and have tried to make sure that that dollar amount matches the activities. For incentive funds for AB 617, it's $265 million is the proposal. It's in recent years, it's been about 245. So we think that was a successful effort. The Clean Cars for All program, which would be our Drive Clean program here in the Valley, received $150 million proposal from the governor. We think that was a victory. The CVRP program, for instance, the General Electric Vehicle program, there was no money proposed for that, but for the Clean Cars for All program, there was a proposed funding amount, which we think is a victory. And then there's $315 million proposed for the clean trucks, buses, and off-road freight equipment. That's more of a voucher type program, and some other components, which is another big allocation to clean up mobile sources here in the Valley. Also, I mentioned earlier, we support the extension of the Carl Moyer program, and it was extended with a bill called AB 8 by Assemblymember Perea here in the Valley I think it was about 2013. The governor is proposing to extend that program through a budget trailer type activity, which was a big victory to get that in the budget as well. So we were happy to see that. So any of you that are familiar with the state budget, this is the starting point, not the ending point. So we will be engaged with the legislature and others to try to make sure that these funding amounts remain and aren't whittled away at as the process moves forward. So with that, I wanted to introduce first our advocates at the state level to talk about the environment up there and other issues. So we have Sylvia Solis-Shaw and Paul Yoder. Let me see if I can get this right. With Shaw, Yoder, Antwi, Schmelzer, and Lang. I think I made it. So I think we're going to start with Sylvia. So go ahead, Sylvia.
Thank you, Tom, and good morning, board members and staff. Sylvia Solis-Shaw, thank you for allowing time on your agenda today for Paul Yoder and I to provide a quick state update. The state legislature was sworn in on December 7th, with the Democrats retaining their supermajority in each house. The Senate Dems picked up 2 seats, and the Assembly Republicans picked up 1 seat in the November election, On that day, legislative leadership highlighted the following as priorities for the new legislative session. The economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, housing production, broadband access, and police and criminal justice reform. After the holiday break, the legislature reconvened last Monday, January 11th, and after a one-week delay due to a coronavirus outbreak among Capitol staff and the post-holiday surge in cases. So while protections against COVID have been in place since last year at the Capitol, the Speaker and the Pro Tem indicated that they expect legislators to be tested at least once a week going forward. The Assembly and Senate are also continuing to differ in their approach to in-person legislation. Senators can request authorization to participate remotely. The Assembly, however, will not allow remote voting or floor session participation, as legal counsel to the Speaker's office has opined that remote votes could be legally invalid. Assembly members can participate remotely only in informational hearings. Otherwise, they must be present at the Capitol to vote in committees and during floor session. This includes policy committees as well as budget committee hearings. And as Tom mentioned, there will be a lot of budget committee action early this year. We also expect for policy committees to allow for remote testimony and public comment, as was the case last session. We are also hearing that legislative leadership is having ongoing discussions about potentially limiting the number of bills per member that can pass from one house to the other. The last number we heard was 12 bills. So usually a member could introduce roughly 25 bills in the first year of the legislative session, but under the rules that are still under consideration, they would be limited to only passing roughly 10 or 12 to the next house to move forward in the legislative process. Also, while the legislature was on break, the governor appointed California Secretary of State Alex Padilla to replace Kamala Harris as U.S. Senator, and to replace Padilla, the governor also nominated Assemblymember Shirley Weber from San Diego. Now that the senator has been sworn into office as of yesterday, the legislature is expected to approve Assemblymember Weber as the new Secretary of State by the end of this month. The governor has also recently announced a plan to reopen California schools. He has allocated $2 billion, over $2 billion in the budget to do that. And he also released the 2021-22 state budget the first week of January. At this point, I will hand it over to Paul Yoder. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, board members. Great to see you all, even if it is through a computer screen. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Samir. So Governor Newsom is asking the legislature to act soon on a number of spending programs directed at combating coronavirus. He's describing some of these as immediate action items and some others as early action items. If all the actions are taken, as recommended by the governor, it's going to be about $11.5 billion worth of a mid-year state budget change, $11.5 billion. The most immediate action item will be the extension of the moratorium on residential evictions, which is set to expire on January 31st. I think probably all the board members are aware. I want to make sure the public is aware that President Biden yesterday, in an executive action, extended that at the national level to March 31st. We do still expect the legislature to act by the end of January, however, because in the latest federal aid package, about $2.5 billion is included in there for California to assist not just renters, but landlords potentially. We do expect the legislature to try to provide that relief again by the end of the month. But other immediate action items, as Sylvia touched on, could include $2.4 billion for school reopening, $600 million in rapid cash grants for low-income workers, and a second round of $550 million in small business grants. We expect action on these items potentially in late February, early March. Other early action items, potentially somewhere in that time frame, could be funding for homelessness, funding for forest health and fire prevention, as well as funding for medium and heavy-duty vehicles, the Farmer program, as Tom mentioned, and the AB 617 program. So a lot of stuff is going to happen potentially even prior to the May revise. And logistically, I think the thing we want to highlight, Tom touched on this a little bit, we're still in a COVID advocacy environment. And specifically, we heard just this week, for example, state budget subcommittees will meet over the next month and a half extensively. They're probably not going to take action on any items. They'll hear a lot of items, but then they'll hold all the items open. And then they're going to stop and hit the pause button probably by mid-March. Now, why are they going to do that? Because one of the things they learned last year is that it's nearly impossible in the state capitol to have budget subcommittee hearings at the same time as policy committee hearings. And so we think the budget subcommittees, again, will meet extensively over the next month and a half and then just hit the pause button until the May revise. And we won't have any budget subcommittees meeting for possibly as long as 2 months even. But we will be at every one of those hearings. We will monitor every single budget subcommittee hearing. We will have notes on every single one of those hearings for any elected person or staff person who wants any of that. So I'll probably wrap up there. We're happy to take some questions as always. Tom mentioned cap and trade. And he mentioned the 2-year allocations being proposed by the governor. We may see some fights there. Less money means more acrimony just in general. And we are also, I want to make sure the board is aware, we're also hearing rumblings from certain members of the legislature who I will say, quote unquote, want to return the program to more of a climate action program. And I appreciate Tom touching on the fact that the legislature did enact it as a tax, that there is some leeway there. That is true. However, it is also true, again, I think because of tightening revenue within that program that folks want to fight over, really what the intent of the program ought to be and what the focus and priority for funding ought to be within that program. It is an honor to represent this district, to be part of your mission, and we'll stop there and we'll take questions. Thank you for having us on the agenda, as Sylvia said.
Thank you.
All right, I think we'll go to Lynn.
Press the button.
I think we'll go to Lynn Jaquez, our federal advocate, and then I think we'll take questions after that. So Lynn.
Good morning, everybody. I assume you can hear and see me, and if you can't, please let me know. Very happy to be here. Lynn Jaquez with CJ Lake LLC. I can't tell you how much I wish I were there in person. At least I think maybe the sun would be shining and I wouldn't be driving around concrete barriers and steel fencing to just make my way downtown. In any event, I thought I would start sharing with you all just very briefly some of the accomplishments, quite frankly, at the federal level that were achieved on the basis of your legislative platform last year, and then move to sort of the update and state of play as we know and as Tom has eloquently laid out up to this point. We tend to focus, we definitely focus on authorizing legislation and amendments and improvements to the Clean Air Act, which don't come easily, but we also tend to focus on funding opportunities for the district and for the mission that you all are trying to accomplish. And I'm very pleased that over the last several years, that thanks to your visits and advocacy efforts, that we have steadily increased the various funding pots that provide some incentive program funding for us that helps us meet our attainment targets. And so for the FY21 appropriations process, which was completed earlier in December, we actually advocated quite strongly throughout the year for increased funding in the diesel emissions reduction program.
And the budget request, and we advocated for at least 87 million. We actually coordinated letters to try to get upwards of $500 million a year for that program, as it looked like climate action legislation and other kinds of programs were moving. In the end of the day, they did not move beyond the House, and we remained within the appropriations and budget process. And I'm pleased to report that $90 million, the highest level to date, off of the $100 million authorization, was appropriated for FY21 for that program. And as you all know, we have also specifically within those funds focused on the Targeted Airshed Grant Program, which brought monies directly to non-attainment areas such as ours. And we have started with an appropriations level of $15 million for that program. And I'm pleased to report that for the FY21 appropriations level, despite the administration request to zero out the account, Congress provided $59 million for the Targeted Airshed Grant Program, an increase over last year's appropriated amount. And also, I know you all know that the district received an historic level of funding this past year from the FY19 and FY20 program. So we hope to continue that in our appropriations for FY22. In addition, we focused on wildland fire management appropriations and National Park Service land and Forest Service funding in order to help you all and your local jurisdictions and the public lands with wildfire management that it has such an impact on our air quality issues. In addition, in all of the various COVID relief packages, as Tom had indicated, in any discussions of state and local aid, we wanted to highlight the needs and potential budget shortfalls that would relate to possible special districts, of which the Air District is one, and wanted to bring to the lawmakers' attention that special districts needed to have an identifiable stream of funding, if only it's still through the states, but still dedicated at least and a recognition of those special districts. We continue to work on COVID rescue and recovery programs. State and local aid will be coming, and there have been acknowledgments of the needs of special districts to receive funding flow through from the state. So that is a brief. We also engaged quite a bit with the EPA in advocacy for the 2006 PM 2.5 plan and the necessary administrative extensions that are required for that over the past year. Moving to this year and our legislative platform, as you all know, the nation's capital looks a little bit different than it did 30 days ago. We have a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives that is the smallest in recent known history. And right now, the differential in majority stands at 4. And there are 3 seats that are still contested. So the maximum and that have filed for review with the House Administration Committee on a seating and congressional seating basis. So at the most, that majority may be 7. At the least, it will remain 4. And then there are open seats that are coming as a result of some of the nominations and administration vacancies that are being filled by members. At the same time, as a result of the January 5th runoff, as you all know, we have a 50-50 Senate, and that makes the Vice President the tiebreaker. And we are currently watching quite closely the negotiations between the Minority Leader now, Senator McConnell, and Majority Leader Schumer on what that 50-50 power sharing arrangement is going to look like from a legislative processing perspective. Part and parcel of this negotiation involves the continuation of the filibuster, which requires a 60 vote approval on measures, and other things such as committee assignments, budgeting, staffing. All of this needs to be negotiated in an agreement in this 50-50 split. We have had this twice before. There, for the 2001 power sharing agreement is being used as the basis for this, but we do not have an agreement yet. Consequently, the current committees are operating under the previous structure. And that leads to the question of confirmation hearings and administrative nominations. We have currently one cabinet member confirmed in the intelligence spot, and we have the defense nominee that has gone through committee, and the Senate is expected to take up both the waiver and the vote on nomination shortly. Other committee hearings in the nomination process are ongoing, and they are trying to rapidly increase the speed. Complicating some of this, of course, is the Senate schedule on what may or may not be a second impeachment trial, and when those articles would come over from the House, how long they might set aside for that. I think you all are aware that now President Biden, as sworn in yesterday, has indicated that he would very much like to focus on his own agenda and the rapid implementation of that. But of course, it is going to be up to the Senate's leadership as to how they proceed. For our issues in particular, we have committee changeovers. Obviously, as you're going from majority to minority, we have a new incoming chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee that has some jurisdiction over our activities, and that is Joe Manchin from West Virginia. We have a new ranking in that Lisa Murkowski from Alaska was termed out, and John Barrasso from Wyoming will take over in the ranking. At the same time, at EPW, the Senate Committee Environment and Public Works, which also has some jurisdiction over us, Tom Carper from Delaware will assume the chairmanship, and he has a new ranking member, Shelley Moore Capeto from West Virginia. So it's interesting that two West Virginians, one in the majority and one in the minority, will have a great deal of say over some of these environmental policies as they move through the Senate. On the House side, our committee remains essentially the same in Democratic control, with Frank Pallone as chair of Energy and Commerce, Peter DeFazio as chair of Transportation and Infrastructure, and we have a new ranking member on Energy and Commerce, Catherine McMorris Rogers. So we expect, we've just had an overwhelming amount of activity thus far in a lot of the executive orders and rollouts and things like that. We've had challenges for remote voting, and of course you all know what happened on January 6th and how the committee staff and House administration are trying to recover, investigate, impose some new protocols for admissions to the Capitol and things like that. But nevertheless, the work continues. For our immediate concern in the administration, I actually am happy to say, and this is all, sort of just by sheer luck and longevity, I think, having been around long enough and done a variety of things, you will notice that President Biden's, some of his cabinet nominees have been quite surprising. They've not been necessarily within the reported names that have come out and those that are pushing themselves. Michael Regan at EPA was one of them, but I am happy to say that given some other work that we do in the agriculture space in particular, that we have interacted with Administrator nominee Regan on behalf of North Carolina Agriculture in his capacity as environmental commissioner, and have enjoyed some interactions there. So we are anxious to make your introductions and outreach and the opportunity to acquaint him and his staff on our particular challenges and needs. We are all well familiar with Janet McCabe. I know that many of you remember many hours spent in the conference room in chatting with her, and so she will be coming back, and our issues are well known for her. And of course, Gina McCarthy as the climate advisor in the White House. You all and we hosted her in our equipment turnover, ag equipment turnover program, and she jumped on an electric tractor, and she also is very well familiar with our issues and challenges, and that education and outreach will begin immediately. So with that, I will also add that that certainly, as you all know and has been reported, the administration is desperately going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time as they are implementing their very ambitious and aspirational agenda. But first and foremost on their mind is the COVID rescue and recovery. And we fully anticipate that that proposal, climate change will be there, infrastructure will be there, but economic recovery and then the COVID testing, vaccination, and then aid to state and local and other business and employment activities will be front and center in the next coming weeks. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, observations.
Well, very good. Thank you. Thank you to Lynn and Paul and Sylvia for your reports. And we'll move to board member questions. And first up is Councilmember Fugazi.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of the work that you are doing on this. I did wanted to know if there was any discussion in the state regarding catalytic converters, and I'll tell you why. It's because here in Stockton, they are getting stolen in 2 minutes. We have video in my neighborhood of a van pulling up. They open the side of the van door, and they take it out and they go. And it has to be a CARB approved converter to be replaced. And you're talking $2,500. And we have people who that's their main source of transportation, and then they can't afford to replace it. I just want to know if there's any discussion at the state level on what we can do. I'd love to eliminate theft altogether, but to help, especially, Stockton's a highly disadvantaged community. People can't afford to replace them. So is there any discussion going on about what we can do for people regarding catalytic converters?
Yeah, well, that's the first I've heard of it, honestly, Board Member Fugazi. But I will say this: I want to make sure everyone knows that if you go to a pick and pull, if anybody takes a converter to a pick and pull or something like that, there's pretty strict documentation that is supposed to occur. So that might be supposed to occur, but that does exist in current law. We've run bills in the past for the San Joaquin Valley on metal theft. And it may just be time to resuscitate those conversations with the state legislative delegation. So I thank you for making me aware of it. And if you want to send me any additional information, me and Sylvia through Tom, please do. Okay? Yeah.
How about stronger?
Yeah. It probably doesn't help to be letting people out of jail early either. So, sorry, just a comment from who did the comment? I don't see further. I don't see further board member hands raised. There we go. Dr. Sheriffs.
Sorry, the old disappearing mouse. Lynn, Paul, Sylvia, thank you very much for centering our discussion and thinking about the future. And thanks very much for the work you have done in the past on behalf of the Air District. Tom, Jordan, thank you likewise for looking out for our funding and also our safety. Thanks for that mask, Tom. It looks great. I just wanted to highlight, I think the priorities as laid out are very good, but I would also encourage the board to elevate climate change issues as a priority. One, because that clearly, as COVID comes under control, is going to be a priority in Washington, and it never hurts to align with that. And likewise, the discussion at the state level, where there has been some pushback in terms of the cap and trade mission of reduction of greenhouse gases, and just referencing the public comments that we had at the beginning of the meeting, which I think were quite eloquent and to the point. Yes, our mandate is criteria pollutants, but a couple of issues. One, climate change is real, it's happening. It is now and into the future making our air quality challenges greater. Other air districts have embraced that notion, and I think that's important for us to have more success in the future. I think that the way it's currently worded, that we would support greenhouse gas reductions that provide for local and toxic emission benefits, is unnecessarily narrow and misses the important point that climate change is making our air quality worse. So that there are many ways that we can embrace that challenge, I think, to our benefit. It really needs to be one of our top priorities. Absolutely support the Moyer and DMV fee extension work. That's an important piece to funding for the district. Really important in terms of work we do in terms of working for more healthful air quality. I'll leave my remarks at that. And again, thanks to the folks working in the halls of the state and federal legislature on these issues for us. But I really do think we should elevate the climate change priority piece.
Right. Thank you for your comments. Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, first I'll start off with a question to Lynn. Lynn, is regular order buried somewhere out in Arlington Cemetery, or will we ever see it again?
Well, Supervisor, I think the issue is, does anybody know what regular order is? Because it's been a long, long time.
Me and you do.
Had it. Unfortunately, one of the benefits of longevity, right? So much lip service is given to regular order. But really, since the mid-90s, much of the agenda control, floor scheduling, and everything has been set by leadership, regardless of which party is in control of the chambers. And I see no evidence, despite much lip service to this, that would end. And of course, another impediment to regular order, some would suggest, is the requirement beyond a majority to pass legislation in the Senate, so that mechanisms that do not require regular order and that vote have become more popular to pass these mega, kinds of packages and bills. A lot of conversation is how much legislation will be going via reconciliation, precisely because of that. And I can just say again that that the conversations, the words that are being used, the president does prefer a bipartisan approach. That's his generation. He knows regular order and reveres it. Wants to bring it back. I don't know. There are so many new members. I think I've shared with you before the just mind-numbing statistic of the turnover and the new members, since 2005, since 2008, now since 2012. So long-winded answer to say, while we all strive to work with regular order, I am not optimistic that we will end up operating within it.
Yeah, and regular order doesn't work with the series of mega bills we've probably had since at least 2008 on. I mean, that doesn't work at all. So, we'll go look for the headstone somewhere. But one thing I want to say before I give up the mic is I won't support any change to our existing advocacy and what we've stated today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor. On to Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Yeah, thank you, staff, for your continued commitment to the air and public health of the Valley. I think from what I see here, our platform really keeps us relevant in terms of emerging policy directions at the state and federal level. I also echo Dr. Sheriff's comments on the continued emphasis for climate change, and thank you for the work that's already outlined here. One thing that is in the platform that I would just like for it to be more in line with what the rest of the item says, which is number 5, that focuses on disadvantaged communities. As it currently reads, the first line says on item C, it says the district will oppose measures that dilute local control by diverting local revenues or the authority over the expenditures of local resources to the state and federal government. Again, because I do think that this paragraph, as it reads, is kind of disconnected with the rest. I propose that the language really just change to add at the end of that statement, so it would read, the district will oppose measures that dilute local control by diverting local revenues or the authority over the expenditure of local resources to the state or federal government where there will be a clear negative impact to disadvantaged communities. And again, thank you for your work, and thank you to all for your presentation.
Thank you. Okay, on to Vice Mayor Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters, Lynn, Paul, Sylvia, and just a note about Mr. Yoder. 10 years ago in a leadership program here in Porterville, he was a speaker, and some of his explanation of how things work, don't work, or are supposed to work was instrumental in my decision to become a public office holder. So I want to thank him for that ahead of mentioning some of the priorities, and thanks, Tom, for discussing some of the priorities. Just want to let you know my support of the AB 617 funding, and it's essential in engaging communities and that are most effective in a productive manner, and it acts as a platform to share with those communities the processes the Air District is required to abide by, and it's just now beginning to demonstrate possibilities. Also, as far as the statement about greenhouse gases and climate change, I think that a practical approach, as mentioned, is needed, an actual contextual and practical application of the ideas, but at a pace that's balanced for the residents as well as the businesses in our area. And that pace has to be also looking at the journey to solutions that we'll need to make. So timing is also very important. DMV fees, support of that, as well as forest management. Yes, please. And I think those are all my comments. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rickman.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you for the federal and state update. Very interesting, and so thank you for that. I had a quick question on the forest management item for policy priorities and related to it. It's item 16. Now, we talked about state and federal, working with the state and feds. In regards to local control, is there a process or an advocacy to review current regulations that inhibit, forest management, in particular, giving property owners more control of reducing fuel supplies, particularly around structures? And you see that, at least I've seen it more in local ordinances than anything else.
So we've had general statements in the platform about reducing regulatory impediments, I have to say that they've been more geared towards the federal land managers than those local issues. That's where the issue has come up most. But, you know, I think we would be happy to make sure that people are able to do hazard reduction type activities around structures and the like and support those as well.
All right, thank you. And one more quick thing in regards to Mr. Ghazi's comment about catalytic converters. What about the enforcement side of that, of the Air Resource Board? I mean, that's something we can advocate for more on the enforcement side, not so much on the law enforcement side, but on the second hand where these people or these individuals are selling. More of an investigative funding, something like that.
Mr. Chair, Samir, maybe I could just respond. I believe that the question, correct me, Supervisor, if I'm wrong, but on the enforcement of some of the mobile source measures, like the truck fleet requirements, perhaps, or is that what you're referring to, Supervisor, as far as state enforcement?
Well, what Mr. Ghazi was talking about, the Cadillac converters.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, and I think we can certainly, I think, incorporate as board direction, you know, based on what Councilmember Fugazi brought up, and you know, if there's an opportunity for having some discussion around, you know, the need for maybe better policy, or maybe it's a resource issue to deal with that issue. If the board seems to have general consensus on you know, looking into that and just seeing if there's an opportunity, we can certainly look at that as part of the advocacy for the year. I think it probably starts with that introductory phase of really just exploring, you know, what, try to understand the issue, you know, seeing if there's some conversations going on around that, and then really seeing if there's something that might be worth pursuing for the year. But I think based on the earlier comments and your support, Supervisor, on that area, it's something we could certainly put on the radar for us to look into.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you. You know, talking about all these different things, and I agree with Zazi too, how you say her name, sorry. But we've had a lot of them around Fresno. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, those converters being stolen. And they got those little electric saws. They go into there and saw it off in like a minute. It's really easy. But on the climate change, the forest stuff and everything else, I think that we've been, as a board member on this for quite a few years now, I think we've been directing our staff and our whole crew doing that daily. Everything we've done, I think, is working for whatever it is, whatever the new things will come out on climate control, climate change that we've been doing. I really believe that we've been advocates, and changing the language, what they've put in this backup right now, I have no problem with what it says. Same way with helping disadvantaged communities. Everything that we do, I think, is directed that way, because everything I do anyway, when I make a decision on this, I want to make sure that any of the monies that we got, it goes towards those disadvantaged communities, whatever program it is. And I just want to thank, I don't know Sylvia too much, but I know Paul and Lynn really well, and thank them for what they've done for us. And when you go into offices, any kind of legislature's office with them, you get their attention really quick, because they are out there all the time promoting for us, and our counties also, who also hired them. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Councilmember Fugazi.
I just was going to comment with Rickman regarding, you know, the catalytic converters. If there's any discussion, you know, moving forward on serial numbering them, they can't get them off, you know, it has to be tagged or something like that from here on out. I think that when we're talking about enforcement, making sure that there is clearly a paper trail of who that belongs to. So just making sure that there's a discussion going on up at the Capitol on how we can mitigate, lessen, reduce, eliminate, you know, and then working with CARB to make sure that we're able to get affordable converters too that meet their requirements somehow through the market, because it just is. It's a huge cost, and I don't see it going away. We're having them stolen 20 to 30 a night, where they go through a neighborhood and just zip them off. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Reyes, do you have another comment?
I did. I'm sorry to jump in again on the
No problem.
catalytic converter issue, but I just wanted to mention real quickly if there's something we can do messaging wise at our tune in, tune up events about the penalties and maybe enforcement that could happen, that messaging I think would go, because there's large groups of people that participate and they may spread the word to those who are either victims or thinking of taking advantage of someone. But that's just a suggestion. Thank you for entertaining that.
Thank you. No, I guess I don't see any other questions, but just in kind of closing, I'm curious, you know, fiscal restraint. I know in the COVID world, it's an easy time to overlook fiscal restraint, but you know, there's impacts to that. I mean, probably more on the state side than the Fed side, but I would just be curious, you know, looking maybe not this year, but into next year. You know, as a county supervisor, we're all concerned about budget impacts and how that's going to flow through the state. And I'm just curious if you have any vision into the future of you know, how that may shake out with respect to the programs that we operate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take this one. The legislative analysts and the Department of Finance are both projecting deficits in the out years. We are, you know, through Governor Newsom's proposals, assuming they're all adopted by the legislature on this particular item, you know, stashing money away into the reserves, which I think they will, because a lot of it is just constitutionally required. We are going to rebuild the reserves, and they will be available again to the state in 22, 23, 24. But there are two big X factors, just very quickly. One, what happens next in Washington, D.C.? Is there another federal aid package that has sort of unrestricted money to states and local governments? Obviously, that'd be great for the counties, for the cities. It would be great for the state of California. And the governor right now isn't banking on any more money. And so any money that is forthcoming, you know, that's sort of bonus to the good. The second thing is the stock market. The windfall exists almost solely because of what the stock market has done and capital gains. It's astounding. The market's up. It's been up. You have a lot of IPOs, which has benefited people. We believe there's a sort of sad, ironic part where some people struggling in California have had to cash in at least parts of their 401ks, and that's added to it somewhat. But largely, it is believed that it's IPOs and people just taking the gains that they've gotten in the market. And so I can't predict what the market's going to do. But if it continues to go up and the federal government provides additional assistance, I think local government budgets are going to, you know, be relatively unscathed, not just through 21-22, but hopefully 22-23 and going forward.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Lynn, you just watch the dial, just keep clicking, right?
You know, the printing press is in active mode, and it just is churning out.
Faster than the eye.
And I will say, you know, even as you saw in the package in December, there were conversations about the funding levels, but I think you've also heard our Treasury nominee Yellen indicate that cash infusion is still very critical early on in the first quarter. And I think this is certainly why reconciliation is is the topic, given the results from Georgia, that if we're going to get state and local aid, that it's not going to garner 60 votes at the level that folks want to see it. But I also think that there is, to Paul's point, there is an increasing awareness that the economic impact is not writ large and shared equally. And so I think there will be a greater emphasis on targeted economic support as more reports and accounting come in from the PPP and other kinds of things. So we do expect in the COVID rescue package, understand 2 packages will be forthcoming at this point in time. 1, COVID rescue, 2, COVID recovery, stimulus, economic stimulus kinds of things. And that's where climate change and infrastructure and these other things can be added. But state and local is being considered as we speak for attachment to the COVID rescue package. And I think the one thing from a California perspective is the lack of a budgetary impact this year necessarily. Now, budget shortfalls going forward, but with different infusions, I think that, again, arguments, there's less sympathy from a budgetary impact than there was 6 months ago. And we need to build that back up a little bit more and recognize a backfill in order to warrant against and protect against future shortfalls.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here today. We don't need to go to public on this. We do need to go to the public and comment. Oh, okay, very good. Oh, with respect to the general, but not for questions to our guests. So yeah, at this time we'll go to public comment.
Janet Dietzkamay.
Thank you. The one thing that is important to those of us with asthma and other respiratory diseases is being able to breathe the air without being sick. And that's a challenge in this valley. We have a unique situation that we have the 5th largest city in California abetting an ag industry that was here first, but we have populations here that are way beyond what should be in an agricultural environment. We have city-related pollutants, mobile sources, industry. It's a unique and troubling situation. Black carbon is the easiest thing for us to attack, and we can do that, and it's the cheapest. And it can be done by stopping wood burning of any kind, including Rio Bravo biomass. We have a situation here that is perplexing, difficult, and dangerous. And now we have, through climate change, we have forests that are dying. The beetles are killing the trees because the climate is affecting the lifespan of the beetles. We have climate change affecting our forests, and we are now having a new norm of forest fires. This is going to be how it is, forest fires. So we must find ways to reduce PM 2.5 black carbon. We have a PM 2.5 plan that many of us put hours of time to working. And we now have AB 617 to help us with other pollutants beyond PM 2.5. The hotter summers, longer summers, going into fall, diseased trees, drier air, trees that are not being hydrated by rains we used to have are all contributive. We need to do what the title is of San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control. That is what we need to be doing in any way we can to make the air so it is not a danger to all of us, but mostly for the thousands of us here in this valley who have asthma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Hamilton?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation today. Kevin Hamilton, Co-Director, Central California Asthma Collaborative. I want to reinforce Dr. Sheriff's and Dr. Pacheco Warner's statements regarding continued support for climate goals, and especially the governor's goal to turn over both the new vehicle fleets for automobiles to electric, zero emission, and trucks by 2035. These things will happen no matter what, and we need to stay in pace with those. By the way, Ms. Fugazi, this will also solve your catalytic converter problem, because electric vehicles do not have catalytic converters. Further on that, these thieves generally take these. Part of my life, early on working school, working my way through school, I worked in a scrapyard. They take these converters apart and pull out the rare earth metals. I don't doubt these people have figured out how to take them apart and pull those same things out, including the platinum, and take it in separate from the converter. So tagging the converter may not be your best solution. Just saying that from my personal experience, dragging those things around a scrapyard. We need to be sure that we're not investing scarce incentive dollars in near zero technologies that will be obsolescent 5 years from now. I think that's, and really stay with actual zero emission tech that not only is coming online and is online, but it's more economically viable for the industry. We support the Carl Moyer and DMV fee renewals, and we will definitely support that agenda at the Capitol, along with other incentive fundings, including Farmer. And that's about it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next is Connie Young.
Yeah, hello again. This is Connie Young. So I'd like to thank you. This is regarding the 9th statement in support of greenhouse gas reduction measures. Thank you for acknowledging both climate change and the need to do more to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm glad also that we'll have a seat at the table as legislation is being crafted rather than watch from the sidelines. You're not alone in your resolve to support greenhouse gas reduction legislation. Just last Tuesday, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce issued a statement in support of market-based carbon pricing. And as I've mentioned before, Citizens Climate Lobby recommends bipartisan market-based mechanisms, one in particular called carbon fee and dividend. I'd like to second Dr. Sheriff's comment about elevating climate change in the wording of this section. It sounds like you'll only support greenhouse gas reduction measures if they also reduce toxic and criteria pollutants. I would suggest instead that the wording reflect the causal relationship between climate change and air pollution, and allow for supporting greenhouse gas reduction measures even if their sole purpose is mitigating climate change. Stabilizing the climate will reduce the hot, dry conditions conducive to wildfires, increased ozone concentrations, and excess dust and allergens in the air. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, we have no further public comment on this item.
Okay, very good. I'll bring it back to the board for action. Okay, we have a motion and
as presented.
thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Bessinger has stepped away. Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch has stepped away. Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner? Dr. Pacheco
No.
Warner?
No.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yeah.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
No.
Ms. Shucklian?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
And I vote aye.
Motion passes.
Oh, thank you. And I just, with respect to the difference in opinion of terms, I've been around and I've said this before, we can call environmental changes many different things. And in my lifetime, I've heard acid rain and global warming and global cooling, and it still doesn't affect our goal here of cleaning the valley's air and politically charged terms, no matter what they might be, aren't going to change our goal. And so I appreciate everybody's opinion on this, and we'll continue to work to clean the valley's air.
Item number 10 is approved implementation of school air filtration incentive program in AB 617 communities.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Todd DeYoung, your Grants Program Director. I'm here this morning seeking your approval to implement the school air filtration incentive program within AB 617 communities within the Valley. Just by way of a very brief background, the communities of Shafter and South Central Fresno were prioritized by the district and ultimately selected by CARB as first-year communities in the Valley to receive clean air resources under AB 617. Your board has adopted SERPs for both communities that include dedicated AB 617 funding to install higher-rated HVAC filters and standalone air cleaning devices in public schools, and this measure was also prioritized by steering committees in both of these communities. So the district has developed guidelines and a program, and we propose to administer this program in Shafter and South Central Fresno, utilizing the approved CARB guidelines for this measure. Air filtration reduces concentrations of particulate contaminants from indoor air, particularly during unhealthy air quality episodes such as those experienced during summer wildfire events. Reducing airborne particles such as PM 2.5 is important because PM negatively affects human health, especially for sensitive populations such as children. Now, older HVAC systems only remove a small fraction of particles that are smaller than 0.3 microns in diameter, and more efficient HVAC filters are important for creating healthier air in school classrooms. So this program aims to reduce the exposure by installing advanced air filtration systems within those schools inside the AB 617 communities. In developing this program, the district has formed a subcommittee to gain a better understanding of the challenges faced by schools. The subcommittee is comprised of community steering committee members in both communities, district staff, and school district representatives. The subcommittee, among its many tasks, include evaluating opportunities and ongoing challenges associated with upgrading the current HVAC systems. They will continue to work with schools to investigate potential filter types that provide the highest level of filtration within the existing HVAC systems. And it's important to note that this program is designed to provide the maximum flexibility based on the individual school district needs and the age of the individual schools within those districts. So again, the board adopted SERPs, or community emission reduction plans, for both communities, as well as the district's 2021 budget include dedicated funding for this program. $250,000 is dedicated for Shafter, and $1.5 million was dedicated for South Central Fresno. We're proposing to operate this program consistent with the CARB Community Air Protection, or CAP, guidelines. It's currently an eligible category under those guidelines. We're proposing to allocate the funding on a first-come, first-served basis. The eligible entities for the program include public schools within the communities of Shafter and South Central Fresno. So the eligible equipment and cost, replacement air filters with a MERV rating, and I'll explain MERV in just a moment, with a MERV rating of 14 or higher, or the highest MERV rated filter available for the existing HVAC system are eligible for being funded. The replacement filters must have a higher MERV rating than the current filters that they're replacing. And the funding for this program would cover the filter costs for up to 5 years. Standalone air filtration systems are also eligible, and those include ventilation systems, air purifier systems, and air filtration systems. Some initial installation costs and associated with the installation of the new air filters are also eligible for being funded under the program, as well as an HVAC impact assessment that's performed after the school district provides us with an application. So that initial analysis on what can be done in an individual school is also eligible for funding under this particular program. So this chart here just kind of shows you where we're targeting the MERV level. And the MERV is the minimum efficiency reporting value. And it's essentially the higher the MERV rating, the more efficient the filter is at filtering out particulates. So we're targeting MERV 14, which is in that first that middle green category. If you get much higher than MERV 15 or 16, you're talking about operating rooms. And then if you get into MERV 17, 18, 19, and 20, you're talking about clean rooms for manufacturing. So MERV is a very high level and a very efficient level of filter. So what can we fund in the program? We can fund air filter panels at up to 100% in the proposed program. The standalone systems, the air filtration systems, we can fund it up to 90%. Those initial installation costs that are necessary to install the new filters, we can fund up to 100% of those costs. And then that HVAC impact assessment can also be funded at up to 100% of the cost. The participants that utilize the funding in this program must commit to utilizing the equipment for a minimum of 5 years. And again, we can pay for up to 5 years worth of filter elements for each school. And then they'll be required to submit annual reports and things like estimated hours of use, number of people in the room, maintenance issues and performance issues of the filter systems. And so approval of today's item would authorize the district to quickly launch the program within Chapter in South Central Fresno. We'll continue to work with the subcommittees to further assist the school districts in identifying projects and in particular challenges on a school-by-school basis. The district will track new funding opportunities that may provide complementary funding within the AB 617 communities. There's a couple of new programs, statewide programs out there that are really targeting the same sort of equipment and upgrading HVAC systems within schools. One of them is targeted at, in particular at wildfires, making safe spaces for folks to go to during wildfire episodes. And then there's another opportunity it's really focused at upgrading school infrastructure. So we're keeping an eye on both of those pieces of legislation, both those programs, and we're hoping that they're complementary and can provide some additional funding in these programs for these schools. So today's action would authorize the district to administer the programs in future board-adopted SERPs, so for additional communities that include similar measures. And then today's action would authorize the executive director to make administrative changes to the program as needed to ensure successful implementation of the program.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just make a closing comment. I wanted to thank the steering committee members. And there's some individuals who've really been helpful in helping us kind of understand the potential opportunities in this space, who've been at all the subcommittee meetings, the school districts themselves, that have also been, they've allocated key staff and high-level staff to really help think about these issues. And this is really our first foray into operating a program like this. And I think based on the lessons that we learn in implementing this program, if approved by the board, these are types of things that we want to come back and report to the board on, so that we can see whether there's broader application of this sort of an approach based on those lessons learned, essentially as a pilot, to in other communities as well. And I just wanted to note that that's something that we want to watch very closely and come back to the board and let you all know how it's looking, so that we can see what other opportunities kind of come out of that process. So with that, Mr. Chair, just want to turn it back to the board for discussion and action.
Mayor Bissinger. During the discussion of this, was there any consideration to permitting charter schools and places like that to also apply for this?
Yeah, schools that are publicly funded are eligible. So as long as if it's a charter school that's publicly funded by the state of California, it would be eligible. What are not eligible, unfortunately, are private schools and religious schools. And that's the state constitution prohibits providing funding to those types of schools. But any schools that are publicly funded by the state of California would be eligible. If there's a particular school that you were thinking about, I'd be happy to research that further.
But even with, if you have a privately funded school, we could still share the technology information so that they could implement it on their campus with saying, here's what you should do, here's the information, and
Absolutely.
we can still do that.
Yeah, we can make all of that program information available to anyone.
Okay,
And
thank
in
you.
fact, just to offer a suggestion, direction to staff, kind of based on that comment, I think through our Healthier Living Schools engagement effort, as we now have learned about these filters and some of the opportunities, perhaps it's something that we, and private schools are part of that effort, it's something that we incorporate as sort of, hey, here's another thing that you can be thinking about, better filtration, here's sort of some options for you kind of a thing. So I think there really is an opportunity for talking about this beyond just this pilot program, and we'll think about that with staff.
And we can also drill down to, nursing, nursery schools and daycare centers and places like that, a lot of parents are choosing that, because they have to work, they have to go there. So that might work out too. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And wow, what an idea this is, and I can't think of how it wouldn't be supported. This is an example of a program that addresses a condition that I think primarily HVAC was just considered for climate control and temperature and comfort. And to just acknowledge that there's a greater benefit there, I think is beneficial to all school districts. I think it will this will draw the attention of school districts that don't reside in those communities that are being looked at through 617. And I think, I applaud the effort to more clearly define the extent of the ideas and considerations that can be applied using this. And really, I think after that 5 years, the MERV numbers, the 14 to 17, will start to be looked at if there's any success level, any healthier outcomes for the students. This may be the respite from some very other harmful air quality in other places for a majority of their day. So I think that this is a wonderful idea, and when I read the item, I was very pleased. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Dr. Sheriffs.
That mouse keeps hiding. What a great program, great ideas. Mayor Bessinger's comments highlight the positive effect for all of us, what's going on in the 617 communities, how these identified needs at the community level bubbling up, absolutely. District staff have gone to a great deal of effort pulling together information on this. This needs to be on our website. There's links on our website, because, hey, we're about health. We're about health for all our citizens, for all of our kids. The funding issues, are the funding issues, and there are various guidelines and restrictions on that. But the information, absolutely, we can get the information. We can be a key player in getting the information out to help protect the health of all of our children, regardless of the setting they're in at a particular time. So thank you, staff, and what a great co-benefit of the 617 process.
Thank you. Councilmember Fugazi.
Thank you so much. I am super excited, and knowing that we're in the AB 617 process here up in Stockton with the future possibilities of us doing this as well. I'm also part of the 3x3 committee, which is 3 council members with 3 school board members for Stockton Unified, and the 2x2 with Manteca Unified. because we have 5 or 6 districts in the city of Stockton, but we have almost a dozen schools in our AB 617 boundary, and this is phenomenal. As a science teacher, this is something that I would use to teach in my class, to show my students not only real time what's happening, but also what the career possibilities are for them and how they could be better stewards. When we did Idle Free California right here at our school, my high school students taught the elementary school students, because we're a K-12 site, about the importance of turning off their cars. And it was really interesting. They were out there in the car line, talking to the drivers, giving out information, checking whose car was on or off. The parents were like, hey, why do you keep looking at my car? But if we were able to then also provide them with what the monitors are saying, is big, but knowing that they're going to clean the air at the schools. I mean, it's just so important. I mean, our kids face so many challenges as it is. If we can do this program in the schools just to create a better quality of air at their schools, I mean, absolutely. I can't wait. I'm hoping that there's enough funding for it to come up here to Stockton with our AB 617 program. But in full support of this, I think it's wonderful. I hope this opportunity is out there for other communities as well. So I'm in full support. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the comments I see from board members. We'll go to public comment.
Janet Dietzkamay.
I am impressed. I am just thrilled by this. I thank the district staff, and I thank the AB 617 steering committee for this. I personally use a MERV 14 filter in my HVAC system and have for quite a while. And I have a question. Will there be documentation of the improved indoor air quality at the South Fresno and Shafter schools using indoor monitors to establish the improvement that the students will realize from the MERV 14 or 13 HVAC filters? This is great. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Hamilton.
There we go. Thank you. And I want to echo Janet's and the other members of the board's comments in support of this. This really demonstrates the district's commitment to public health in these communities and to listening to residents, and as they raise the issues that they feel are most important to them. These are our most vulnerable citizens, or some of our most vulnerable citizens, and they need to be protected from near road and regional air pollution. This really goes a long way toward making sure that they have no lost opportunities to learn, which is how we refer to absenteeism related to illness. And this is just amazing. So I think this is going to be a model going forward that'll be shared in other places, not just in California, but around the nation. There were some attempts at this made in Southern California. I think the district has done a much better job with this, and we'll see the results of that. We are also working with some of these schools to place air monitors, both inside and outside the school, smaller off-the-shelf monitors that can be used as teaching tools to bring some of these young people into the science world and hopefully really set a future for them that is beneficial to the country and to themselves. So we're really looking forward to that. I appreciate Ms. Fugazi's remembrance of the efforts under Healthy Air Living Schools that CCAC did in partnership with the district in Stockton. We had some great pictures of those events, and the idea of getting the children to go out and, instead of giving the parents tickets for idling outside the school to give them information about no idling. But you know, it's really the way it should be. The kids will inform the parents. They will come back and talk about this. They will talk about the air quality in their schools, and they'll experience the better health because of this. So congratulations to district staff and to this board for being so forward-thinking in this particular moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I see no further comment on this item.
Great. We'll bring it back to the board for action.
Move adoption.
Second.
Sheriffs.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll, Madam.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Ms. Fugazi?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Aye.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Sheklian?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
I vote aye. Thank you.
Motion passes. Item number 11 is authorize $150,000 in funding for socioeconomic analyses in support of regulatory development.
All right. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, and I'll be providing a brief overview of the upcoming need for socioeconomic analysis to support a number of regulatory projects coming up over the next year and the funding needed to support those. A little bit of background. Despite all the progress we've made to reduce emissions, improve air quality, we still need enormous emissions reductions to attain the latest federal PM 2.5 standards. To address these standards, your board adopted the 2018 PM 2.5 plan in November of 2018, which included a number of strategies and measures from incentive measures to regulatory efforts to reduce emissions and attain these PM 2.5 standards that are ahead of us. We also have ongoing rule evaluation efforts to support the expedited best available retrofit control technology review requirements under AB 617. And all of these regulations continue to come at an increased cost to the Valley due to the decades of stringent regulations that we've already put in place, and looking at the most cost-effective approach that we can take with this. So through your board's direction and guidance, we continue to conduct accurate and Valley-specific economic analyses to evaluate and minimize economic impact of district regulations. So our economic work for our regulatory efforts really consists of two parts, a cost-effectiveness analysis and a socioeconomic analysis. And both of these satisfy the state's requirements of looking at both cost-effectiveness and socioeconomic impacts while trying to minimize impacts to the Valley's economy and any adverse impacts. The socioeconomic analysis includes a number of components that we've listed here, looking at the industries that are impacted, employment impacts that could happen because of the regulation, looking at a range of costs, cost-effectiveness and alternatives, the emissions reduction potential, and how this effort could help attain federal and state air quality standards. And just a few notes on the cost effectiveness analysis. We use a standardized methodology to do this for all of the regulatory efforts that we make, where we collect a number of pieces of information about the costs of complying with rule provisions, looking at the technologies and the dollar of cost per year for different industries to comply with our rules. We then look at the emissions reductions that could be achieved from these rules and ultimately end up in a dollar per ton emissions reduction estimate to help us develop our projects going forward. And this effort doesn't reveal impacts on business and industry employment or profits. That's done in the socioeconomic part, which I'll talk about in a minute. But looking at the cost effectiveness analysis, we collect capital cost information, installation costs, operation and maintenance costs, and looking at the emissions reduction potential as we put these projects together. On the socioeconomic analysis side of it, this is where we take a close look at the impact to the Valley's economy and employment through the implementation of our regulations, and looking at that against the revenues and profitability to ensure that the impact that won't be significant, and if it is significant, we can think about the approach we're taking And so we go through a process where we gather information about the businesses and industries across the valley that could be impacted by these regulations, looking at employees throughout the industry that's impacted, payroll costs, revenue and sales, profit margins to help in this work. And so in the work that we've done with this, we commonly contract with economists who can help gather information for various stakeholder meetings that we have, soliciting feedback and information from source operators, consultants and vendors, manufacturers of the technology, and trade associations. We gather all this information with our economist who works with us to look at the potential impact of these regulations on jobs and revenues and profits. We look closely at this, looking at alternatives. If there's a significant impact, looking at our proposed emissions limits, compliance schedule, seeing what can be done to come up with a good approach for this, and being consistent with your board's direction and core values of improving air quality and supporting a strong economy. In this work that we do, we strive to have an innovative and creative approach with these measures that reduce emissions and improve public health in a cost-effective fashion. And we provide this information to your board so that can assist with your decision making when these regulations are brought before you for consideration. So just a little bit of background on the work we've done so far. In August of 2019, your board authorized up to $200,000 to be spent on socioeconomic analysis for a number of regulatory projects that we worked through in the year 2020, and we have them listed here. A number of these were brought to your board just last month in December for consideration, and we continue to work through one of these to complete it here soon. We do have more socioeconomic analyses that is needed in this coming year to support the next schedule of regulatory projects that we're working through, which is shown in this table here. We've already started the public process for the majority of these by the end of 2020, and we'll continue to be working through these in the year 2021. And there's a variety of regulations here that we're considering that we will need socioeconomic analysis support for these. So to complete this socioeconomic analysis work, your board approved $150,000 in our 2020-2021 budget, which we have available to use for this. And this work will help ensure that our rules are complete and accurate, and to do so we may need to obtain services from more than one consulting firm, as they can have different expertise in different areas and industries. And consistent with your board's direction, in the work to retain consultants, we'll be looking for consultants who have knowledge of industries in the valley, who've demonstrated success in interacting with these industries, and their ability to provide expert economic analysis to support our rule amendment projects. And just as this was done with the previous projects from last year, we'll be doing this again, where we will be asking the consultant to consider COVID-19 and its impact on the valley's economy and the economic work that they could do to consider that as they think about the potential impact of regulations for these industries in the future when they come into effect. So if this proposal is approved by your board, what we're recommending today, we would seek to solicit and select qualified economists with the necessary expertise to help us out with this. And consistent with the district's procurement policy, we may be going through a competitive RFP process as needed to get help from different economists for this. We anticipate that the funding provided through today's recommendations is sufficient to address the regulatory development needs over this coming year, but if needed, we will return with additional requests for your board's approval as needed. And as I mentioned, the 2020-21 budget does have some funding set aside for this specifically. So to close, what we are recommending is that you authorize $150,000 in funding to obtain services to assist the district in performing the necessary socioeconomic analyses for upcoming district regulatory development efforts, and to authorize the board chair, upon executive director APCO recommendation, to execute agreements for a total of up to $150,000 for socioeconomic analysis services. And that's it for my presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. I don't see currently any board member questions. Is there any from the public?
Dr. Sheriffs actually has a question, sorry.
Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. And the mouse gets away from me again. This is obviously very important work. Part of how this board struggles with balancing our charges, our mandates, what we're trying to achieve in terms of health and a vibrant economy. And it's something as long as I've been on this board, we've done this at one level or another. You know, often the analysis has been at as we look at how we're going to administer grant or incentive funds, you know, what's the effectiveness of doing it this way or that way? And what are the co-benefits of doing it one way or another? Because that socioeconomic analysis is only one piece of the analysis as this board makes decisions on moving forward. But I guess, so my question really is, how is this different than what we usually have done?
Mr. Chair, I could respond to that. It's actually not. I mean, the short answer is that this recommendation is consistent with the board's established policy for conducting these socioeconomic components of regulatory development, which of course include many other components that go into a regulatory development, including the role of that rule in helping us meet various health-based standards and a variety of other things that go into that process. That policy that guides this particular piece of the process is something that the board regularly has discussed and reviewed. I want to say it was last year that the board actually reaffirmed, you know, the approach that's used in looking at this particular aspect of regulatory development. This item, in a way, includes any recommendations that would change in any way the board's policy on that. That's something that can come back to the board. Again, you know, if there's any level of interest in kind of talking about that again. But this is a state mandate. I just want to remind the board to conduct this analysis. That's the minimum that needs to happen. The board's policy actually adds even more interaction in this process than even beyond state mandates. And that's already been established by the board in previous items. That policy, John actually summarized that just for background as part of the item here. But this item is strictly to have the services in place to implement the board's existing policy and state mandates.
That it? Very good. Okay, Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Yeah, hi. So, Samir, could you just clarify that for me? So we are only voting on whether or not to authorize, not what is included in the socioeconomic analysis. Is that correct? Would that be something different?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that is correct. That policy is already established. And so this will simply be a question of whether you're in support of having services provided to implement existing board policy and state mandate.
Got it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Reyes.
Yes, thank you. And this just does, it kind of reinforces my previous comments on supporting a balanced pace and to reach an outcome on a timeline. And what the board's already added to this, I think helps our region stay in the game economically, and it helps, you know, mitigate some of the war of attrition that some of our local businesses are facing now. And it's always worth it to look into it. So that was my only comment. Thank you.
Very good. I see no other board member comments, public comment.
Janet Dietzkamay.
Thank you. During the winter months, it's been pretty bad, the inversion, bringing the pollutants down to breathing level, which is exactly what's happening. With the inversion, the pollutants come down. I consult the Clovis North Via Avenue Fresno monitor that shows most of the air pollutants and have noticed that it's the PM 2.5 and the PM 10 that are affecting us through this. And I'm hoping that whatever this comes to, it will, as I mentioned before, support air pollution control. To me, that means air pollution control means we will minimize the pollutants we are breathing, especially during the inversion period of our year. Now, I noticed that there have been a lot of no burn days, and I am puzzled why we have so much PM 2.5 through the last few weeks. I am puzzled by that. I have reported a couple of times where my husband has noticed someone is burning in our neighborhood on a no burn day, and the burning continues. So public education, I am seeing it on Facebook, and thank you. Thank you. I do see public information on Facebook. I don't on television. I don't see it. They do mention no burn and so forth on weather during the weather report, but I'm not seeing a push as a commercial filler during programs. So whatever the outcome of this vote is, I hope it supports air pollution control, minimizing the pollutants that we are exposed to regarding especially the inversion months of the year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I see no further comment on this item.
Very good.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco-Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yeah.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
And I vote aye.
Motion passes. Item number 12 is, excuse me, item number 12 is verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities.
Mr. Chair, if I could maybe jump in. Dr. Sheriffs, I know that you were the board member at the December hearing, and there's also been a transition, and I know the board is aware of this, of that role to Dr. Pacheco-Werner, but my suggestion would be, Dr. Sheriffs, that perhaps since you were officially the board member for that meeting, that perhaps you could provide that report. I know we're here at noon as well, so obviously I'll follow the chair's lead on this as to how you do that. But and then just to make sure everybody's fully aware, the board member role has now been transitioned to Dr. Pacheco-Werner, and that's effective here in 2021. So I want to congratulate her here on that role, and also really thank Dr. Sheriffs for his many years of great service to the California Air Resources Board, and that's my suggestion for how to basically handle the item. But feel free to provide that report however you both would like, given your former and now current role. So
great dance, Mayor.
Good dance, Mayor. I agree. Actually, the CARB board took place before our San Joaquin board, and I did comment on a couple of the items, but would remind everybody that in the report they are outlined, and would just highlight a couple of the items because they're so important to the work we do, and our collaboration is so important with ARB. But enhanced vapor recovery, clearly the volatile organics, the escape of gasoline fumes and so on, very important. Mobile source strategy is absolutely critical, has been pointed out many times by many at this meeting. Key to meeting our air quality goals, doing community risk reduction, and also meeting our equity goals. but the mobile source strategy reviewed the governor's goals for 2035 in terms of all new passenger vehicles being zero emission vehicle sales at that time, and working towards, where feasible, 100% sales for trucks as well. Critical to our Valley work to achieving our healthful goals. The funding plan for 2021 for clean transportation incentives, AQIP cap and trade proceeds, and again, reminding us of how important the cap and trade program is, how important it's been for funding emission reductions here in the Valley. You know, I would just say it has been a great privilege to serve on the ARB board, to represent this board to ARB. I know Dr. Pacheco-Warner is already diving into the issues that she'll be wrestling with at the February meeting. And a reminder to everybody on this board, her success depends on us. It depends on us in terms of our advice, in terms of our listening, in terms of our guidance, in terms of our sharing with her. And I know she's interested in hearing from each and every one of these of our board members. So I'm confident about her abilities, interest, representation, and her success really does depend on the participation of everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Go to APCO report. Your mic, please.
Apologize. Yeah, I have one comment, Mr. Chair and board members. Just wanted to highlight really quickly an issue that's been raised by several of the public members. We have seen some really high levels of stagnation and just poor dispersion conditions on the valley floor. And it has been noted, there's been quite a bit of outreach conducted on following the air quality levels, using the tools that are available out there, RAN, other tools to really understand the air quality, to do your part to not burn and really be a part of the solution. And just wanted to note that in response to one of the comments that was raised, one of the things that happens during these types of conditions is not only is it important to reduce activities like residential wood burning, but we also see that because of the conditions, the atmospheric conditions, there's quite a bit of generation of PM 2.5 that occurs and then gets trapped on the valley floor. And so it's a very big reminder of just how important it is to keep reducing emissions from mobile sources, other sources that produce NOx. What we see during these inversion conditions is quite a bit of ammonium nitrate, which is a secondary PM 2.5, to try to answer some of the questions that came up. That's where you see these spikes. You know, we have just a perfect recipe of conditions where PM 2.5 gets formed, number one, and then number two gets trapped for extended periods of time on the valley floor. And it's a very unique set of conditions that really our region probably has the most extreme set of those atmospheric and geographic conditions that really lead to those sharp rises in emissions during these periods. Now, if there's a positive side to this, under very similar conditions in the past, we would have seen much higher concentrations actually of PM 2.5 under the exact same conditions, you know, before we had implemented many of the measures that are in place today. And while we're still working, obviously, to keep reducing air pollution, just wanted to note that in the trends that we see, you know, over time, that there's certainly been a lot of improvement. You know, just several years ago, we would have seen much higher concentrations under the exact same conditions. So just wanted to provide that very brief report. And as we always do, coming out of the winter season, we'll provide a much more extensive report on everything that we saw during the winter season, including residential wood burning strategy and air quality conditions and everything else that was done during the season to try to reduce PM 2.5. So just wanted to provide a quick report on that.
Very good. Thank you. And any other board member comments? I don't see any at this point, but Dr. Sheriff, are you looking for your mouse again? Are you? Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, just a quick shout out to our new board members, and I know I've talked with Samir, and he's going to be organizing some opportunities for you all to get some further information on how and why we do things the way we do here, and the policies that we work under, and so encourage that, and also extend any assistance that I can be to any of you through this new process for you, that and any of the board members will be willing to share their thoughts with you, I'm sure. So thank you all for joining us today, and we do not have closed session today, so we will be adjourned. Thank you.